Chapter 46. I'm just practicing a new divine ability. Li Qingshan couldn't say that, so he said respectfully, it's just a hard body technique. That. Just now, old hero Liu, you punched me more than 100 times, so I'll only charge you 1,000 taels. His words were much more polite than just now, like a salesman who treated his customers as his god. The other disciples were still in shock, wondering if they were dreaming. You. Big senior brother was just about to scold Li Qingshan, but when Li Qingshan glanced at him, he didn't dare to say anything. Instead, he fiercely glared at Li Long. Didn't you say that he was a third-rate master? Li Long also felt wronged. Back then, Li Qingshan was indeed a third-rate master. Could it be that he was hiding his strength? Now, this was the only explanation. No matter what, he couldn't believe that Li Qingshan had improved to this level through hard work during this period of time. Liu Hong waved his hand. Go get the money, master. Don't talk nonsense. Liu Hong handed 1,000 taels of silver notes to Li Qingshan. Just now, I've been rude. Li. Young hero, please don't take offense. Take this money as my apology. Li Qingshan was startled. He didn't expect Liu Hong to change so quickly. As expected of Li Long's master. Originally, he thought that Liu Hong was angry because of the humiliation. Young hero, you're extraordinary and your martial arts are excellent. If you continue to sink in the wilderness, wouldn't it be a waste of talent? Why don't you join my iron fist? I definitely won't disappoint you. As for that black wind stockade, I'll help to say a few words. I think that black bear will give me some face. Who doesn't die in Jianghu? Are you saying that only your master is allowed to kill people? As the saying goes, a porcelain pot doesn't touch an earthen pot. As Liu Hong spoke, his tyrannical aura was swept away. He looked like a kind old man who cared about his juniors. The disciples had never seen Liu Hong like this before, and they all widened their eyes. Li Qingshan suddenly realized that he and Liu Hong were now on the same level. In fact, he was even a little higher than Liu Hong. Unlike when he entered the door, Liu Hong's eyes were looking down on him. All of this was because he had shown an outstanding martial arts. Since the other party had become polite, he returned the courtesy. Just now, I was rude and offended old hero Liu. This money was just a joke, please take it back. After the two of them made some concessions, he put the money into his bosom, feeling much more at ease. Thank you for your kind intentions, old hero, but I have no intention of joining any gang for now. I haven't been hiding during this period of time, I've been training. I'll personally remove the tumor that is the Black Wind stronghold. I'm just here to gather some information. Liu Hong said, the Black Wind stronghold has existed for so many years, so how can they be uprooted so easily? I'm confident that I'm not much weaker than the Black Bear, but if I take on the Black Wind stronghold alone, only death awaits me. Being trapped in a battle formation is not a one-on-one battle. Even my strength won't be enough. Martial arts were not the only things that mattered in the Jianghu. There was also influence. He recognized Li Qingshan's martial arts, but he was still a loner without any influence. Li Qingshan shook his head slightly. I have my own plans. Liu Hong could not dissuade him any further, so he told him about the recent changes in the Jianghu near Qingyang in detail. When Li Qingshan heard that the Black Wind stronghold had gone to make trouble for the Drawn Rains village, he said, Old hero Liu, I have something to ask of you. Please spread the news as much as possible that I, Li Qingshan, am in Qingyang city and have not fled. I will take responsibility for my own actions, and I will never drag others down with me. All right. You really are a young hero. I believe that you're not afraid of anyone in Qingyang city, Liu Hong said. Also, the Dragon's Gate sect has sent many people to the Drawn Rains village. They want to see hunting Chief Huang. May I ask what they want? Li Qingshan thought about it and realized it was about the spiritual ginseng. However, when he thought about how he still had an old grudge with the young master of the Dragon's Gate sect, he could not help but sneer. Thank you for your advice, old hero. I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave first. Liu Hong sent Li Long to see Li Qingshan off. His face suddenly changed, and he smashed a wooden pillar in the training grounds with a punch. If anyone spreads word of what happened today, don't blame me for being merciless. The first senior brother, Wang Lei, called out, Master. However, he said nothing. Liu Hong saw how the other disciples were all filled with grievance and indignation. Liu Hong's change from arrogance to deference made the disciples feel like they had lost face. Liu Hong sighed. Do you think I was too fawning on those in power earlier? However, we were indeed rude in the first place. But, weren't you the one who ordered us to do this? If he was just a third-rate martial artist, then he was just being arrogant and rude just now. Even if I killed him, I wouldn't be able to say that I was wrong. But he isn't. We've misjudged him. Putting on such a stance in front of a second-rate martial artist or even someone even stronger is us being rude and offending him. There have been countless killings in the martial world because of this. Isn't a battle like that foolish? In the Jianghu, the strong are revered. If I didn't understand that, I wouldn't have been able to live until now. You've been living far too comfortably in Qingyang City. Even when there are masters passing by, I'm the one who comes forward to take care of them, protecting you. As a result, you don't even understand something as simple as that. If Li Qingshan were present, he would definitely laugh aloud at the sky. As it turned out, the weak were rude. Not only were they rude, but they were also unreasonable and powerless. Compared to determining the right and wrong of everything in the world, this principle was much simpler and more practical. However, this was the logic of an experienced member of the Jianghu. He would never take advantage of his seniority. When it was time to submit, he would submit. It was exactly this logic that allowed him to live out his remaining years in peace. The disciples all lowered their heads and accepted his teachings. Then, they recalled the reason for Li Qingshan's fame. With his powerful martial arts and vicious methods, if they really fell out with him, none of them would be able to make it out of this courtyard alive. Liu Hong nodded in satisfaction, maintaining his dignity among the disciples. In the end, he concluded, in the Jianghu, no matter how great your martial arts are, you won't be able to make it far if you blindly act tyrannically. Someone's going to be out of luck this time. His words were very profound. No one knew whether he was talking about the Black Wind stronghold or Li Qingshan. However, under Li Long's lead, Li Qingshan made a beeline for the arsenal of arms. With silver in hand, he was filled with confidence. He stepped through the door. Boss, I want to see weapons. He glanced at Li Qingshan, and when he saw Li Long, his expression immediately eased up a lot. He placed down the account book in his hand and clasped his hands. So it's young hero Li of Iron Fist. I've brought a friend to look at weapons. The ones outside are all inferior. Come, come, come. Please come in. It was impossible for a business owner to avoid making contact with a local tyrant like Iron Fist. Li Long could be regarded as having some fame on the streets of Qingyang City. All the shopkeepers would show some politeness when they saw him. Stepping into the hall, a variety of weapons greeted their eyes. Blades, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, and tridents were all available. It really was a large weaponry store after all. May I ask what weapon this young hero is proficient with? Is it a blade or a sword? We have high-quality forged blades and forged swords of all sizes here. If you're not satisfied, you can even have them made for you. As the shopkeeper introduced, he ordered people to take out high-quality blades and swords. Every single one of them flickered with light and were extraordinarily exquisite. Chapter 47. The shopkeeper was taken aback. Seeing that Xiao Chen was a martial artist, he didn't want a weapon that he was good at, but instead wanted a heavy one. But he immediately laughed. Yes, yes, yes. Who cares what you want, as long as you can sell it? This was something that Li Qingshan had carefully planned out. If he wanted to break through the Black Wind stronghold, then it would really be a battlefield. If he wanted to use his strength to the fullest, he could only use the heaviest and longest weapon, using it to suppress the enemy's advantage in numbers. A strong worker came forward with a ghost head broadsword. The shopkeeper said, "This broadsword weighs 35 pounds and is 5 feet and 3 inches long. It can easily break a hair. Are you satisfied, young hero?" Li Qingshan grabbed the handle of the broadsword and waved it around. The broadsword in his hand was as light as a feather, too light, heavier. The shopkeeper was speechless. How much strength did he have? 2 workers came forward with a green dragon halberd. The shopkeeper said, "This halberd weighs 62 pounds and is 8 feet and 6 inches long. Look at this crescent moon. Unless it's an experienced blacksmith, it can't be forged like this." Li Qingshan flicked the tip of the halberd. "This is fine, but it breaks too easily. Besides, is there no heavier weapon?" He could still remember the scene when he swung the halberd and the halberd's tip broke. Of course, that was mostly because he didn't know any halberd techniques and used it carelessly. But he wasn't going to deal with just 1 or 2 enemies. The shopkeeper stared at him, but for the sake of Li Long, he didn't refute the words easily broken. He thought to himself, just what do you use a weapon for? He wanted to embarrass Li Qingshan, so he waved his hand and said, "Then please follow me to the armory. There's a weapon that you'll definitely be satisfied with." Li Qingshan became curious as well. He followed the shopkeeper to the backyard, passing through the training grounds for testing weapons and arriving in the armory. The weapons in there were even more dazzling and varied, but the one that stood out the most was the huge, black spear in the center. The spear seemed to be forged from pure iron. The spear tip and the spear body were one, and there wasn't even a tassel. Only a tiger's head was cast at the joint, biting the spear tip and emitting a rough and bold domineering aura. This spear is called the Overlord Spear. It's 12 feet long and weighs 142 pounds. It's the heaviest weapon in our shop. If you want to buy it, we also have a set of the Overlord Spear technique. Alright, this is it. Li Qingshan walked forward and picked up the Overlord Spear. A cold and heavy feeling pressed down on his palm. With a shake of the spear, it was like a soaring flood dragon, emitting a buzzing sound. The shopkeeper and the workers were speechless. Being able to pick it up was one thing, but being able to use it was another. If one couldn't even move an inch while holding the weapon, then it would just be a joke. However, being able to shake the great spear meant that the user had the strength to control it. Just how much strength was needed to do that? This was the most suitable weapon in Li Qingshan's mind. With this weapon, he would be able to give the Black Wind Mountain bandits a pleasant surprise. He would show them what it meant by an inch longer, an inch stronger. However, he didn't know any spear techniques, so he asked, "Where's the spear technique?" The shopkeeper said, "If you are determined to buy it, then this weapon is not cheap. Let's not talk about how much effort the craftsman put in, but with so much iron." Li Long said, "Cut the crap. How much do you want? Just say it. Do you dare to ask for more?" The shopkeeper stretched out 5 fingers. "Since young hero Li has said so, then I will only take the cost. 500 taels." Li Long immediately reprimanded, "What? 500 taels? Are you crazy? Aside from me, who else would want to use this black iron rod? It's just gathering dust here. I don't think it's even worth 100 taels." As the 2 of them were haggling over the price, Li Qingshan's eyes were looking around the armory. A bright light caught his attention. In the dark armory, the weak light was extremely eye-catching, as if it was unwilling to be buried in the dust. Li Qingshan looked around and saw that no one else seemed to notice the speck of light. He knew his eyes were different from regular people, so he made his way over like it was a coincidence. He arrived on the weapons rack and picked up a wooden box. Opening the box, he saw an exquisite knife lying inside. It was only 3 inches long and was covered in a layer of faint blue light. He asked, "Shopkeeper, how much is this?" The shopkeeper was startled. "Young hero, you really have good eyes. This is our shop's treasure. A disciple of a famous family who had fallen on hard times left this knife here. It is extremely sharp and I spent 100 or 200 taels to buy it." Li Qingshan casually put the knife back into the box and said, "It's a pity it's too light and too small." "That's not true. It's precisely because this knife is light and small that it's hidden. It can be used to defend oneself at a critical moment." Li Long said, "You're bragging again. No matter which one we pick up, it will be your shop's treasure. We can just treat this knife as a bonus. I won't haggle over these few taels of silver with you." "How can that be?" The shopkeeper cried out in shock as if someone had stabbed him with a knife. In the end, one big and one small, along with the spear and knife, settled on a price of 400 taels of silver. The shopkeeper had a pained expression on his face as he handed the items over to them. However, his heart was filled with joy. These 2 pieces of trash had finally been sold. There was no need to talk about the Overlord spear. After it was forged, no one would be able to use it. It was a waste of so much iron, and it was a waste to reforge it. He cursed the blacksmith for this spear. However, the origin of this knife was true. A young man in dire straits had brought this knife to his door and was sent away by him for 10 taels of silver. However, he quickly regretted it. This knife was indeed a good knife that could cut through iron like mud. However, it was too small. Could it be that someone would buy it for a few dozen taels of silver and use it as a flying knife? Li Qingshan did not know any spear techniques. The Overlord spear technique was quickly delivered to his hands. As expected, it was the most common spear technique in Jianghu. However, the names of the moves were extremely domineering, such as sweeping away 1,000 army and Overlord rampage. Li Long only took a glance and no longer looked at it. Li Qingshan, on the other hand, looked at it from beginning to end. He carefully pondered for a while before coming to the practice field and practicing each move. Spear techniques were much harder to practice than knife techniques. However, after he cultivated the strength of an ox, not only did he increase his strength, he also gained a deeper understanding of the principles of martial arts. Weapons were just an extension of the limbs. At first, Li Qingshan's movements were very slow. However, as time passed, his movements became faster and faster. A great spear danced like a black dragon, coiling around Li Qingshan's body. The practice field was filled with a violent gale. Li Long retreated a few steps back. He was shocked speechless by the power of the spear. It was as if he was really a peerless general, using his own strength on the battlefield to fend off an army of thousands. Wherever the spearhead pointed, a cold light would shoot in all directions, blood would splatter everywhere, and ghosts would wail and gods would howl. Although he did not hear what Liu Hong said, he understood why his master suddenly became respectful towards Li Qingshan. At such a young age, he already had such amazing martial arts skills. He only looked at the spear manual once, yet he was able to master it thoroughly. In addition, he also had incomparably ruthless methods. Such a person, as long as he did not die prematurely, would become a famous figure in Jianghu in the future. His future would be far above that of a second-rate expert. He might even be able to comprehend the innate realm and reach a realm that he could not even imagine. Chapter 48. If Li Qingshan knew what he was thinking, he would definitely praise him for having a good eye. He was a true innate master, but this ox demon's fist of great strength did not place much emphasis on qi, and he had only cultivated it for a short time, so it did not show. His mind was completely immersed in the spear technique. When he was excited, he shook his wrist, and 7 spear flowers bloomed. They were like flowers in full bloom, bright and dazzling, shaking the air and making banging sounds. Li Qingshan suddenly retracted his spear, and the wind stopped. His muscles relaxed, so satisfying. Although he was not a master of the spear, after all, no matter how good his comprehension was, no matter how profound his supernatural powers were, he could not compare to a true master of the spear, who had decades or even a lifetime of practice. But no master of the spear was his match. As long as their weapons collided, the Overlord spear that weighed 142 kilograms, in addition to his ox demon's great strength, would send any weapon flying. A crack between the thumb and forefinger would be a light injury, and the bones in his hand or even his arm could be broken. This was why he had to find a heavy weapon. As the saying goes, 1 man can defeat 10 men. After testing the spear, Li Qingshan was still not satisfied. Shopkeeper, I need 2 more things. One is a feather arrow, and the other is armor. You don't seem to have them here. He had already decided to use his advantage to the fullest. Although his ox demon forges its hide could block the fists of a second-rate master, or even the swords of a normal person, it could not block the weapons of a third-rate master infused with inner force. Blunt weapons and sharp weapons were 2 different things. With his strength, even if he wore a few dozen kilograms of armor, it would not be a burden, but his defense would greatly increase. When he rushed into the enemy's lair, he would not have to worry about the enemy's numbers. The shopkeeper said awkwardly, "These are all military equipment, not normal weapons. Normally, they are not allowed to be sold. I'm afraid they can only be found in the city's arsenal." Actually, this was not the main reason. Most of his customers were people of the pugilistic world. Who would wear heavy armor when they walked the pugilistic world? There were even fewer people in the pugilistic world who used bows as weapons. Otherwise, with the profit-seeking nature of the merchants and the strong background of the arsenal of arms, as long as there was money to be made, there was nothing they wouldn't sell. Li Qingshan nodded. "All right, then I'll bid you farewell." The shopkeeper said, "Wait, may I know young hero's name? Why have I never seen you before?" "I'm Li Qingshan. This is my first time in Qingyang, so of course you haven't seen me before." The descending tiger, Li Qingshan. The shopkeeper was shocked. How could he not know about the person who had caused such an uproar recently? Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows and made up his mind to change his nickname. He went to the silk shop to buy a set of good clothes and booked a room in the best inn in the city. Li Qingshan washed up and changed his clothes. When he came out again, Li Long also praised him. Good. He had changed into a set of navy blue warrior's clothes, which accentuated his well-built figure. He seemed extremely valiant, but it was not just the clothes that made the man. After experiencing slaughter and arduous cultivation, he was in high spirits, like a treasured sword that was gradually sharpening its edge. His bronze-colored face still couldn't be said to be very handsome, but the corners of his face were clear like a stone carving. As he looked around, he really had the flavor of his nickname Fierce Tiger Descends the Mountain, and he was awe-inspiring and didn't allow others to belittle him. At this moment, 2 bailiffs suddenly arrived. When they saw Li Qingshan, they bowed in a hurry. They did not even dare to look at him directly, completely unlike the arrogance they would show to regular citizens. "May I ask if you are young hero Li? Our district magistrate wishes to see you. The carriage has already been prepared." Li Qingshan was stunned. He did not know what the district magistrate wanted him to do. Could it be that he wanted to reward him for killing the bandits? He immediately agreed. Since he was the district magistrate, he had the responsibility of suppressing the bandits and pacifying the people. If he could send some people, then he would be more confident. Entrusting the overlord spear to Li Long, Li Qingshan followed the bailiffs to the front of the yamen. A fat figure came out to greet him, grabbing Li Qingshan's hand. He looked him up and down, his face full of admiration. Li Qingshan withdrew his hand with a face full of discomfort. "Sir, why are you looking for me? Little benefactor, have you forgotten about me? That day on the mountain, the tiger." Li Qingshan suddenly remembered. "So it was you. This official is Yi Dachuan. I have been looking for little benefactor for a long time. Please come in." Yi Dachuan welcomed Li Qingshan into the hall behind the yamen. His face changed. "Why are you still wandering around the city? Quickly escape." Li Qingshan said, "Why would I escape?" The advisor said, "Do you really have no idea what's good for you? The people of the Black Wind Mountain are searching for you everywhere. If you don't hide your tracks properly and show your face in public in Qingyang City, someone will come knocking tomorrow to take your life." As he said that, he shoved a bag of silver and other items into his hands. "We've already prepared a horse outside. You can hurry to Clear River City right away. Don't stop along the way. There's a letter in there. Take it to the prefectural yamen and hand it to the district magistrate." Ouch! Yi Dachuan kicked the advisor. "That's what I wanted to say. I'll get my younger sister to ask the prefectural magistrate to guarantee you a prosperous future. No matter how powerful the people of the Black Wind Mountain are, they won't be able to chase you there." Then he sighed. "Originally, I wanted to keep you as a constable so that you can lend me a hand and collect more bandit-suppressing silver." Cough, cough. "The reinforcements I've asked for haven't arrived yet. Perhaps they've been delayed on the way here. This place is just too remote." The advisor thought, the prefectural magistrate would love nothing more than for you to die a clean death. Why would he send someone for you? Originally, Li Qingshan found it hilarious. Yi Dachuan was short and chubby. He wore a set of great, red official robes, which made him seem extremely like the corrupt officials in dramas and novels. Even if they were slightly better, they would just be mediocre, while if they were slightly worse, they would just oppress the good. However, when he saw how eager he was to pave a path for him, he was touched. No matter how many crafty and despicable people there were in the world, there would always be people who knew how to repay kindness. Originally, when he left the mountain, his head was filled with thoughts of how he could uproot the Black Wind stronghold and slaughter them all before avenging the humiliation from the young master of the Dragon's Gate. His thoughts were written all over his face, and he radiated with murderousness. As time went on like this, his vicious, murderous side would definitely gain the upper hand. However, Li Long always helped him out because they were from the same hometown, while Yi Dachuan earnestly wanted to repay him for saving his life. Neither of them could be regarded as righteous people. They were just ordinary people among the masses, but it was exactly these people that allowed him to see that human nature was not just limited to evil. Li Qingshan clasped his hands. "Thank you for your kind intentions, Sir Yi. There's no need to call me a benefactor. You can just call me Qingshan. However, I didn't come back this time to escape." "You're not going to escape," Yi Dachuan said furiously. "Kid, you don't know your place. Do you know just how great of a risk I've taken by letting you enter the government office?" The advisor also tried to persuade him. "Yeah, you should escape." Li Qingshan smiled. "I can escape, but Crouching Ox Village can't escape. As for you, Sir Yi, you can't escape either, can you? Since I'm bold enough to remain here, I obviously have some confidence." He opened the bag and saw a few silver ingots. He grabbed them and squeezed them casually. Yi Dachuan and the advisor widened their eyes as they watched the silver ooze out of Li Qingshan's hand like mud. They were not people of the Jianghu, so they had never seen martial arts like this before. Immediately, their evaluation of Li Qingshan increased by another level. Yi Dachuan hesitated. "With your martial arts, you might really be safe as long as you remain in Qingyang City. I'll introduce you to a few more people. I don't think the bandits of the Black Wind Mountain will be bold enough to attack the city." He wanted Li Qingshan to stay behind very much. By then, if any aristocrat dared to look down on him, he would send Li Qingshan to beat them up. He would be able to collect whatever amount of silver he wanted. Li Qingshan said, "Sir, you said you want me to become a sheriff?" "Yes, yes, yes." Yi Dachuan beamed with joy. He had already begun fantasizing about the awe-inspiring might of running around with Li Qingshan. Chapter 49. Yi Dachuan was stunned by his ambition. He had always wanted Li Qingshan to stay alive under the threat of the Black Wind stronghold. It would be best if he could use him again. He had never thought about taking the initiative and provoking the Black Wind stronghold. He wanted to persuade him to stop dreaming. "I'm not collecting money to suppress bandits, but to fill my own pockets. When the time comes, I'll scare those aristocrats and collect the money. Wouldn't it be great if everyone gets a share?" However, he saw Li Qingshan's determined gaze. Although his face was still rather childish, it was filled with confidence and high-spirited righteousness. He could not bring himself to say any more words of advice. This young man possessed a power that could move people's hearts. Yi Dachuan hesitated and struggled for quite a while before suddenly slamming the table. "All right. If you really have the confidence, I'll gamble with you." "Sir, you mustn't. There are a few people in those places that you can't afford to offend." The advisor rushed over. Yi Dachuan said, "Go away. I'm also hot-blooded. What can't I afford to offend? I'll definitely offend them." His face was hot-blooded, but his mind raced. Li Qingshan killed 20 or 30 people from the Black Wind stronghold alone, including a boss. The Black Wind stronghold has around 200 people, so that's 10 times that. Can't I recruit 160 or 70 people? It had to be mentioned that Sir Yi, who had neither wandered the Jianghu nor fought in battles, was rather naive in his calculations. However, once he began to fantasize, he could not care too much. If he destroyed the Black Wind stronghold, he would like to see just who would still call him an idiot, someone who had risen to power through nepotism. He would like to see just who would still be bold enough to not pay him. If he allowed his sister to talk to him, Perhaps he could even be promoted and leave this damned place. Most importantly, the Black Wind stronghold had plundered this place for so many years, so they must have accumulated quite a lot. Perhaps they had 5,000, no, 10,000 taels of silver. He thought about the silver that had piled up like a mountain. So he could not even maintain his hot-blooded image anymore. He almost drooled. At dusk, the largest and most luxurious restaurant in Qingyang City, the Qingyang restaurant, was brightly lit. There were over a dozen tables of luxurious banquets that even made Yi Dachuan's heart ache. They had invited various people in Qingyang City, all of whom were either rich or noble. Yi Dachuan followed the principle of no sacrifice, no gain. This time, he had put in a lot of effort. Of course, the main reason was that no matter how he tried to persuade the restaurant manager, the smile on his face didn't change, but he still refused to let Sir Yi pay on credit. Therefore, he sat on the main seat with an ugly expression. Li Qingshan stood at the side like a bodyguard, willing to serve as a foil. Seeing Yi Dachuan's ugly expression, he smiled and said, "My lord, you don't have to feel bad about the money. Haven't I already taken it out?" It turned out that in the end, Lord Yi really couldn't take out that much money. It was Li Qingshan who paid. He wasn't a narrow-minded person. As long as people treated him sincerely and courteously, he would be much easier to talk to than ordinary people. He had the heroic spirit of someone who didn't care about money. But if someone were to put on a high and mighty attitude and try to take him down a notch, then please forgive him for not having such a good temper. Yi Dachuan said embarrassedly, "Wait for me to raise the money, I will definitely return it to you." As the county magistrate, he had lost face and was afraid that this powerful subordinate would laugh at him. Li Qingshan waved his hand and said, "This is also because my lord is helping me. Don't mention the money again." The advisor went downstairs to welcome the nobles. The wooden stairs made dong 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 sounds non-stop. Everyone who came up bowed to Yi Dachuan and said in a seemingly respectful manner, "My lord Yi." Then he took a deep look at Li Qingshan and cupped his hands, saying, "This must be the tiger from the mountain who killed dozens of mountain bandits with his own hands. His name is well known, well known." They were all well-informed people and knew very well who was the main character today. It wasn't this Yi Dachuan who had no foundation or means, but this young man who killed dozens of mountain bandits with his own hands. They weren't afraid of Yi Dachuan, and they weren't even afraid of Li Qingshan. But the combination of these two people's fame and power made them feel a little tricky. They probably couldn't treat the county magistrate like they did in the past. Heavy footsteps stepped up the stairs. Before the person arrived, the advisor shouted at the top of his voice, "Old hero Liu of the Iron Fist has arrived." Everyone's eyes were focused on the stairs. Many people even stood up. The degree of respect they showed was not something that Yi Dachuan, the empty shell of the county magistrate, could compare with. Iron Lion Liu Hong walked up the stairs with his two disciples, Wang Lei and Li Long. As expected, he looked around arrogantly. The aristocrats all surrounded him and called him Old Hero Liu and Old Brother Liu according to their age and status. Even the two disciples beside him received countless praises. Many aristocrats said and glanced at Li Qingshan as if to say, "We know the Iron Fist. Although you are fierce, you can't act recklessly." In their eyes, although Li Qingshan was powerful, there was still a huge difference between him and a long-established figure of the Jianghu like Liu Hong. This was what they relied on. Li Qingshan had never thought that Yi Dachuan would introduce Liu Hong as one of the important figures. However, with some thought, he knew that even if no one took Yi Dachuan seriously when he became the county magistrate, there would still be a welcoming ceremony for the important figures of Qingyang City. Otherwise, they would be looking down on the prefect. Obviously, the greatest local tyrant of Qingyang would be present at an event like this. Seeing Yi Dachuan's awkwardness, Li Qingshan hesitated over whether he should stand up or not. He placed his hand on his shoulder and told him to sit still. At this moment, a shocking sight appeared. Liu Hong left the crowd and arrived before Li Qingshan. He smiled, "Young hero Li, we meet again." His gentle attitude made people wonder whether this was the Iron Lion Liu Hong they knew. Wang Lei bowed awkwardly as well. He no longer dared to act rashly towards this young man who was much younger than him. Yi Dachuan was just about to introduce Li Qingshan, but he was stunned when he saw this. You know each other? Liu Hong patted Li Long's shoulder. He's from the same hometown as my disciple, so we've known each other since young. It was Li Long who brought him to Qingyang today to buy this outfit. Ever since he arrived upstairs, he saw Li Qingshan as soon as he saw him. He wore a set of Navy warrior's clothes and stood by the window with his arms behind his back. He stood out like a lone pine tree on a cliff, standing out like a crane among chickens, drawing attention. Even with his slight dislike towards Li Qingshan, his eyes could not help but light up. He praised inside, "What a handsome young man." The men of the Jianghu did not particularly like men who were overly handsome. Instead, someone like Li Qingshan could be treated as a benchmark in his eyes. Li Long's talent was already extraordinary. He had taken a liking to him and accepted him as his final disciple, but compared to Li Qingshan, it was like comparing wormwood to a pine tree. I wonder who saw through him and unearthed this fine piece of jade. Why didn't I see him when I first came to Crouching Ox Village? Never did he think that when he accepted Li Long as his disciple, Li Qingshan was still in swaddling clothes. Even though the various changes the abilities had brought to Li Qingshan, he could also see that Li Qingshan's talent was not bad in the first place. Coupled with his wisdom from 2 lives, if it were not for the fact that he had reincarnated into a remote place like Crouching Ox Village, he would have been valued by others a long time ago and achieved some accomplishments. Although heroes were not afraid of low birth, no one could deny the importance of birth. Originally, they wanted to rely on Liu Hong's influence to fend off Li Qingshan, but never did they think that Li Qingshan was even more familiar with Liu Hong, as if they were of the same generation. When they looked at Li Qingshan again, their gazes became much more cautious. However, Yi Dachuan was overjoyed inside. So the government guards came from you. Qingshan once saved me from the jaws of a tiger, so I've finally found him today. I'm inviting him to be a constable. Originally, Liu Hong found this strange as well. How did Li Qingshan come into contact with County Magistrate Yi as soon as he arrived in Qingyang City? Just now, he understood. So Qingshan is the young hero who chased away the tiger you spoke of, County Magistrate. Sir Yi is recruiting people of talent, regardless of birth or age. It's only a matter of time before he makes a name for himself in Qingyang City. Li Qingshan said in a manner that was neither haughty nor humble, "You're too kind, old hero Liu. I just want to borrow Sir Yi's power to do some things for the people of Qingyang and remove a cancer." Chapter 50. The time had come, and all the guests had arrived. Yi Dachuan stood up and toasted them. He first said some pleasantries like "It's my honor that everyone has come" before getting straight to the point. He was furious and sorrowful. "I've invited everyone here this time because of something that has to do with the survival of our Qingyang City. That's right, it's the cancer that is the Black Wind stronghold. The bandits of the Black Wind Mountain are extremely vicious and have committed countless crimes. They've stolen so much silver, who knows how many people they've killed." He was extremely furious that the bandits were actually richer than him, the district magistrate. The advisor kicked him under the table, and he coughed gently and changed his words in a hurry. "Now, they want to slaughter the Crouching Ox Village. As the local magistrate of Qingyang City, I can't tolerate this. Everyone must have heard of the person beside me, the descended tiger, Li Qingshan." He placed special emphasis on his renowned nickname, the descended tiger, which made the corner of Li Qingshan's eye twitch. "This young hero is also the sheriff of me, or even the entire Qingyang City. Not only did he personally kill the 3rd boss of the Black Wind stronghold and several dozen bandits, but he also wants to destroy the entire Black Wind stronghold right now. I hope everyone can contribute money and effort to make this happen. Only then will he not let down the heavens and the earth." With that, he drank all the alcohol in his cup. Qingyang City did not have any soldiers for the district magistrate to deploy. Even the bailiffs were old, weak, sick, and disabled. However, the large clans all had large courtyards with high walls and many guards. As a result, most of the security of Qingyang City was actually maintained by the Iron Fist Gang. If he wanted to deploy soldiers, he could only borrow people from the aristocrats. As long as each family provided 4 or 5 people, it would basically meet District Magistrate Yi's expectations. However, the aristocrats were unable to drink anymore. They looked at one another. Was the district magistrate serious this time? Asking for money was normal. Which district magistrate did not need money? However, asking for people was not normal. Apart from the previous few district magistrates who would walk around the mountains with a group of people after receiving money, the latter district magistrates did not even bother putting on any airs. They just said the timing was not right. As for when the timing was right, only the heavens knew. The restaurant was in an uproar. The aristocrats did not even want to fork out money, let alone people. If they died or were injured, they would have to spend money to comfort them. Furthermore, they had offended the Black Wind stronghold. Who knew where Crouching Ox Village was? Whether it was destroyed or not had nothing to do with them. It was not like the Black Wind stronghold could touch them, and there would be endless deaths of other people's children. A middle-aged gentleman who looked to be in his 40s or 50s said, "Lord Yi, we all understand your concern for the common people. We can't just watch and do nothing. We have to do something. However, it's impossible for us to send people. Even if we agree, the guards won't agree." He very implicitly stated his position. "Seeing that you have the strength now, everyone can give you some money as a token. You take this money and stay here obediently. Don't cause trouble for us. I'm finally going to get money." Yi Dachuan felt that this was a bit unbelievable. He really wanted to pinch his thigh to see whether he was dreaming or not. Ever since he became the district magistrate, he had been asking for money everywhere, but no one took him seriously. He could not even ask for a single tael of silver. Success always came too suddenly. Yi Dachuan calmed himself down and glanced at Li Qingshan. He began to consider whether he should stop while he was ahead. Li Qingshan frowned. He could not blame these aristocrats for being selfish. Most people were like that. Coupled with the actions of the previous district magistrates, it was already rare for them to be willing to pay. Since he could not use this power, there was no need to force it. He said, "Then thank you all. Father, don't give him money." A young man stomped up the stairs and stared at Li Qingshan fiercely. Li Qingshan immediately remembered that this was the young man who had raced on the road and knelt down to give him money. Why did he suddenly become so bold? Was he relying on the presence of the adults? "Don't mess around. This is not a place for you. Leave," the middle-aged aristocrat berated. However, the young man did not back down. Instead, he said arrogantly, "My senior brothers are here. The people from the Dragon's Gate sect are here." One of the aristocrats shouted. His voice was filled with surprise. "My son practices martial arts there." "Yeah, me too." The aristocrats were overjoyed. They whispered to each other, rejoicing that someone stood up for them and that they did not have to pay this sum of money. However, Li Qingshan's expression suddenly turned cold. The humiliation he suffered on the mountain path that day came back to him. A group of people of all ages came up the stairs. All of them were dressed in white and carried swords. They gathered together and looked as if there was no one else around. It was truly an awe-inspiring sight. The person in the lead was the young master of the Dragon's Gate sect, Yangjun Magistrate. "You invited everyone to the banquet. Why did you ignore the Dragon's Gate sect? Are you looking down on us?" Yangjun looked around. When he saw Liu Hong, he nodded his head slightly. It could barely be considered a greeting. When he saw Li Qingshan, his eyes lit up. Then, he exploded with extreme hatred. "You really are here. It took us a long time to find you. You were looking for me." Li Qingshan found it strange. Looking at the other party's expression, it was as if he had deeply offended them. However, since they had delivered themselves to his doorstep, he would not let them go easily. It was a pity that he did not have the great spear with him. Otherwise, who knew how many people would die or be injured with a sweep of the spear? "I only regret not killing you with one slash. Today, I will make you spit out everything you ate." Yang Jun looked at Li Qingshan like he was looking at a mortal enemy. He knew that the spirit ginseng had been taken by Li Qingshan, so he immediately flew into a rage. The spirit ginseng had missed him by a hair's breadth and ended up in this country bumpkin's hands. Although the spirit ginseng could not be digested so easily, it had definitely lost most of its medicinal properties after such a long time. Otherwise, how could this country bumpkin have the strength to kill the Black Wind Stronghold's third boss? That should have been his. In his eyes, Li Qingshan was an extremely despicable and hateful thief. Li Qingshan had stolen something that belonged to him, so how could he not gnash his teeth in hatred? He would definitely cut Li Qingshan to pieces. Yi Dachuan stood up in a hurry. Young hero Yang, let's talk this out. Qingshan is this county's constable. How can you shout about killing him? When he saw the Dragon's Gate sect coming at him aggressively with all of them wielding swords, he immediately felt weak. As the saying went, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. When the swords came stabbing at him, no matter how skilled Li Qingshan was, how was he supposed to block them? Yang Jun said with a dark expression, Lord District Magistrate, this person stole something extremely important from our Dragon's Gate sect. We are here today to apprehend him. Please do not stop us. Otherwise, be careful that swords are blind. Then, without waiting for his reply, Yang Jun ordered, take him down. He was extremely arrogant and despotic. Then, he smiled sinisterly. Don't kill him. I will slowly interrogate him about the whereabouts of the item. The dozen or so people pressed forward, and the aristocrats moved to the sides with a whoosh. The district magistrate and the advisor fled, and only Liu Hong was left at the large round table, drinking leisurely. Among those present, only Liu Hong understood Li Qingshan's strength the best. However, the relationship between Iron Fist and the Dragon's Gate sect could be deduced from Yang Jun's attitude just now. Iron Fist took the path of the lower class, accepting disciples from the common folk. Meanwhile, the Dragon's Gate sect took the path of the upper class, and most of their disciples were from wealthy families. Although they were not as incompatible as fire and water, they had never seen eye to eye with each other. That was why he refused to say a word of warning. He could not wait for more people from the Dragon's Gate sect to die, especially that arrogant and despotic Yang Jun who disrespected him. However, he was also guessing what the important item was. He seemed to have heard some rumors. Chapter 51. Qingshan stood at the window like a lone pine tree, as if he did not see the Dragon Gate sect disciples approaching. Dragon Gate sect knows that I have the spirit ginseng. Who told you? Huang Binghu. To think that I saved your life. The anger of being betrayed rose within him, but the corners of his mouth slowly curled up, revealing his white teeth. Liu Hong's heart skipped a beat as he watched from the side. What a heavy killing intent. Bang! He lifted his leg and kicked the heavy square table in front of him. The square table was wide and big, and it could accommodate at least 10 people. It was made of jujube wood and weighed more than 100 kilograms. It was sent flying by his kick, and with an extremely fierce momentum, it crashed into the disciples of the Dragon sect. Kai Da was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. He didn't even think that there would be such a move. He looked at the square table coming at him in shock. His reaction was fast. He immediately abandoned his sword and waved his palm. He circulated all the inner force in his body and slapped the square table. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. Li Qingshan sneered. Kai Da's arms broke at the same time, and his chest caved in from the impact of the square table. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and at the same time, the sound of bones cracking rang out. The square table did not stop moving. It carried 7 or 8 Dragon Gate sect disciples with it, smashing through the railing and falling down the stairs with a loud crash. There were guests downstairs as well. When they saw the Dragon Gate sect disciples going up the stairs majestically and murderously, they were wondering who was going to be unlucky. They craned their necks to watch the show. Suddenly, they saw a table and 7 or 8 Dragon Gate sect disciples fall down, and they screamed and fled. It was only when the table fell to the ground that they surrounded Kai Da, still in a state of shock. When they saw that Kai Da was no longer breathing, they saw that the other Dragon sect disciples did not die on the spot because Kai Da blocked them. However, their tendons and bones were broken from the impact, and they groaned in pain. They were all dumbfounded. When had they ever seen a Dragon Gate disciple like this? Who was upstairs? For some reason, Li Qingshan thought of bowling. Those Dragon Gate disciples were all dressed in white. Didn't they look like bowling pins? Unfortunately, they did not hit all of them. As the remaining 5 or 6 Dragon Gate disciples were closer to the side, they did not hit the table. However, they were covered in cold sweat from the shock. They stood there in a daze, not knowing how to react. These disciples of rich families practiced martial arts and had never experienced a real battle. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Almost no one could react to it. In that instant, the situation reversed. The initially aggressive Dragon's Gate sect was wiped out in the blink of an eye. Only Liu Hong was able to clearly see Li Qingshan's movements. He had a grave expression on his face as he thought about whether or not he would be able to block it, and whether or not he would be able to dodge it. His conclusion was worrisome, and his brows furrowed even tighter. The mocking smile on his face deepened. Today, he had lost a lot of face to Li Qingshan, but now he seemed to have regained a lot of it. Li Qingshan ignored the others and strode towards Yang Jun. Yang Jun was lying on the ground. Li Qingshan had kicked the square table at him earlier. However, with the Dragon's Gate disciples blocking the way, he had time to react. At the critical moment, he lay on the ground and escaped the disaster. Even now, he still could not believe what had happened. The people he had brought were all experts in the sect. There were 3 third-rate experts among them, and the others were rare experts. However, more than half of them had died in a single move. His act of denouncing Xiao Chen had become an extremely ironic joke. As he watched Li Qingshan approach, he suddenly thought of the dozens of mountain bandits who had died in Li Qingshan's hands. He thought of the terrifying infamy of the person before him and remembered that his martial arts were far from enough. He drew his sword in a frenzy. Kill him. One sword stabbed at Li Qingshan. At the same time, 5 swords flashed with cold light as they stabbed at Li Qingshan from the front, back, left, and right. The stunned Dragon's Gate disciples reacted as well. They were fellow disciples who practiced together all year round. Although they did not have much actual combat experience, their teamwork was not bad. The speed of this attack was exactly the same, trapping Li Qingshan in a net of swords. Be careful of the sword formation, Li Long shouted a warning, but it was already too late. At the same time, 6 swords stabbed into Li Qingshan's body. Delight appeared on the faces of the owners of the swords. They did not expect it to work so easily. Our Dragon's Gate sect's sword formation is indeed extraordinary. It was unknown whether it was mockery or pity on Liu Hong's face. He was too inexperienced and had too little experience in fighting in the Jianghu. He was supposed to win, but he gave his opponents the perfect opportunity to surround and attack him. He had dug his own grave. However, the fall of every young talent caused a veteran like him to feel regret. He also felt somewhat relaxed. He wanted to proudly say, "Look, the older the ginger, the spicier it is." The strongest might not be able to live to the end. The tip of the sword stabbed into the skin by an inch and could not go any further. The swordsman's delighted expressions turned into shock. They exerted strength madly, but they only bent the tough swords. Liu Hong was shocked. Could it be that he has already trained his external defensive martial arts to the point where he is impervious to weapons? Furthermore, a fine steel sword infused with inner force was not something that ordinary weapons could compare to. This youth had given him too many surprises. Li Qingshan said slowly, "No wonder people say that 2 fists cannot defeat 4 hands. Such a combined attack is no weaker than a full-powered strike from a peerless expert." A strange red light that was hard to see with the naked eye flowed in his eyes. "However, how can such weak and powerless swords injure me?" His quintessence spewed out, and his swords shattered. All the swordsmen were sent flying back, vomiting blood. However, only faint white marks were left on Li Qingshan's skin. Yang Jun felt an extremely surging quintessence rush into his body. The inner force that he had cultivated for so many years could not stop it at all. It rampaged through his body, tearing his tendons and meridians apart. Just as Yang Jun was about to fall off the building, a figure flashed and appeared behind him. With a wave of his sleeve, Yang Jun landed steadily on the ground. Li Qingshan's expression turned grave and vigilant. Although he saw the person's movements clearly, he could not keep up with such a movement technique. Although his defense was shockingly high, his speed was his weakest point. Yang Anji grabbed Yang Jun's pulse with a cold expression. Yang Jun's meridians were in a mess. His martial arts could be considered crippled. Yang Jun called out father and fainted. Yang Anji looked at Li Qingshan again. His eyes were filled with a terrifying killing intent, and he no longer looked like a scholar. His heart was filled with hatred and regret. He had come to the restaurant earlier, but he thought that Yang Jun and his disciples would be enough to capture Li Qingshan. If he had seen Liu Hong, it would have been rather difficult for him to speak. As a result, he had remained hidden in the restaurant the entire time, just in case. However, he never thought the situation would change so quickly. From the moment Li Qingshan kicked away the square table and cleared out half of the Dragon's Gate disciples, he wanted to take action, but Li Qingshan fell into the sword formation right afterwards. He was doomed. Even Liu Hong, someone who had witnessed the power of Li Qingshan's martial arts, believed that Li Qingshan was dead for sure, let alone him. As a result, he stopped himself, but it was already too late. Liu Hong chuckled. "Brother Yang, long time no see. Why have you suddenly caused such a great disturbance? What's the reason?" Li Qingshan saw that Yang Anji bore some resemblance to Yang Jun, and from what Liu Hong had said, he knew that the person before him was the sect master of the Dragon's Gate sect, the greatest of the martial arts society of Qingyang. After all, Yang Anji had been in Jianghu for many years, so he had a firm will. Unlike those rich disciples, he immediately put down his son and didn't even look at Liu Hong. Instead, he said to Li Qingshan, "I originally wanted to persuade you to hand over the item. I didn't intend to hurt you, but now I've changed my mind. My son has no enmity with you, so why are you so ruthless?" Towards the end of his words, he couldn't hold back his monstrous anger. Hearing this, Li Qingshan laughed. "You don't plan to hurt me? No grudges." If his martial arts were slightly weaker and he fell into Yang Jun's hands, he wouldn't know how much torture and humiliation he would suffer. On the mountain path, the threat and humiliation from a superior expert might not be considered as enmity. Perhaps Yang Jun felt extremely wronged. "Yes, I only said a few words to you. I didn't really chop off your hand." Chapter 52. The Dragon's Gate sect was arrogant and overbearing, but in everyone's eyes, Li Qingshan was 10 times more arrogant and overbearing than the Dragon's Gate sect. With a single sentence, he had decided the fates of the two great organizations of the Jianghu that had occupied Qingyang for a very long time. However, Yang Anji's face no longer showed any anger. He recovered the calmness and rationality that a swordsman should possess. Based on his instincts, he had determined that Li Qingshan was one of the few powerful opponents he would face in his life. However, he had absolute confidence. His agile and graceful movement technique countered Li Qingshan's external martial arts the most, just like how Li Qingshan countered Liu Hong's iron fists. No matter how great his strength was, it was useless if he could not land a hit. Li Qingshan could block the swords of regular Dragon's Gate disciples, but he could not block the sword of a mighty second-rate master like him. Li Qingshan understood this extremely well, and he could clearly sense that the sword Yang Anji carried was different from the fine steel swords regular disciples carried. However, against an opponent like that, fleeing was impossible. All he could do was face him head-on. The two of them faced off, and the restaurant suddenly fell silent. The killing intent was suffocating. Clang! Yang Anji drew his sword from its sheath, and a cold glow swept towards Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. The blade actually shone with a faint layer of light, just like the knife he had obtained today. The person had a name, and so did the sword. This was a famed sword that everyone in Qingyang City knew about. The Soaring Dragon Sword was a treasured sword that had been passed down through the Dragon's Gate sect for several generations. Only the sect master had the right to wield it. The person was powerful with a name, and the sword was sharp with a name. Even in the hands of regular people, the sword could slice through metal like mud. In the hands of a true swordsman, it would be a true murder weapon. This is a spiritual artifact. Returning to before the banquet, Oxen said as he looked at the knife in Li Qingshan's hand. "What's a spiritual artifact?" Li Qingshan fiddled around with the knife in his hand. Have I really picked up a treasure? In his previous life, he had often read about such things in novels. They would randomly stroll around a grocery store and pick up a peerless divine artifact. From then on, they would be able to kill anything that stood in their way. Oxen smiled disdainfully, shattering his fantasy. This item barely has a layer of spiritual qi attached to it, so it can't even be considered a low-tier spiritual tool. It's most likely used by apprentices who have just started learning tool forging. However, at your level, it can be considered a treasure. However, the ridicule in the ox's eyes became more and more intense. This thing could only be used as a flying knife. Whether it was a cultivator or an ordinary martial artist, it was a useless piece of trash. Li Qingshan carefully put away the knife. This was the first spiritual tool that he had obtained. It had a great commemorative value. After all, it was considered a rare item. However, he did not expect to see another one in the blink of an eye, and it was in the hands of the enemy. The shopkeeper of the arsenal of arms was also among the aristocrats. While the other aristocrats were fleeing in panic, he stared at the flying dragon's sword with infatuation. If this sword was in the arsenal of arms, even if Li Qingshan took out all of his silver and knelt on the ground to beg him, he would not sell it. Just when everyone thought that Li Qingshan would charge forward like just now, he rolled to the side to avoid the sharp edge of the sword and arrived at a corner of the restaurant. Yang Anji changed his moves even faster. With a flick of his wrist, the light of the sword moved like a shadow, pressing towards Li Qingshan. Separated by a few feet, the cold air pierced Li Qingshan's skin, making him feel cold. Wherever the two went, the aristocrats all screamed and ran, thinking that they were going to be used as meat shields. Li Qingshan was not that shameless. He reached out and grabbed a square table, using it as a weapon. The large square table was as light as a feather in his hands. A strong wind blew and the candles flickered. Yang Anji did not put this power in his eyes at all. Wherever the light of the sword passed, the square table was cut into pieces like tofu. In the blink of an eye, only one leg of the table was left in Li Qingshan's hands. Li Qingshan seemed to be at his wit's end and threw the table leg out. Perhaps it was because he was panicking, but he missed and it flew past Yang Anji's head. Yang Anji's sword was like a rainbow. Li Qingshan's back was pressed against the wall, unable to retreat or dodge. The restaurant suddenly became pitch black. The table leg that flew out from Li Qingshan's hands struck down the last light. Trying to escape. It's too late, Yang Anji shouted. However, he did not see that when the darkness descended, Li Qingshan's face did not show panic, but a smile. Bang! Li Qingshan clapped his palms together and caught the flying dragon's sword in a hair's breadth. Yang Anji sneered. It was wishful thinking for him to catch the sword with brute force while he was flying forward. The sword's edge suddenly pierced forward. As the sword and palm rubbed against each other, an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing could be heard. The tip of the sword was only 3 inches away from Li Qingshan's throat. Yang Anji's expression suddenly changed. A cold wind came from the back of his head, making him feel a life-and-death crisis that he had not felt for many years. This is impossible. This was the first thought that came to his mind. Although he could not see, his other senses were still there. Someone was so close behind him. How could he not sense it? How strong was the qinggong? Could it be a hidden weapon? If the lights in the restaurant were still on, everyone would be able to see a small knife flying towards the back of Yang Anji's head. It really did look like a hidden weapon. However, if someone could open their spirit eye like Li Qingshan, they would see that the small knife fitted perfectly in Little An's clean, white hand. Little An cultivated the path of white bone and great beauty and bathed himself in fresh blood every day, so he was no longer afraid of blood and qi at this level. He could truly get close to experts, but he still lacked a suitable weapon. If he used a regular hunting knife, with Yang Anji's strength, even if he did not train in external martial arts, his protective inner energy would still be able to knock the knife away. It would be difficult for him to deal any fatal damage. However, things were different now. In Little An's hands, the spiritual knife was not just a piece of trash. Instead, it was a divine weapon for assassination. Li Qingshan had used himself as bait to lure young Anji here. He and Little An had not made any prior preparations, nor had they communicated with each other. They had absolute trust in each other, and as expected, Little An did not disappoint him. Their cooperation was perfect. Young Anji was also impressive. He lowered his head and dodged the knife in the nick of time. The blade practically scraped his scalp. He was shocked, but he did not panic. As long as he continued to exert force and killed Li Qingshan, he would be able to deal with the hidden weapon expert behind him with ease. The small knife suddenly turned and stabbed downwards. It was not a hidden weapon. Young Anji's mind was immediately thrown into disarray. This was because he still had not sensed the presence of a living person behind him. A chill rose up in his heart. He ignored everything else and tried to pull back his sword to defend himself. Li Qingshan bit down on the tip of the sword with both hands and snickered coldly. It was easy to stab, but the first thing to be pierced would definitely be your head. Want to pull back? Then don't even think about it. As long as the sword existed, the person existed. This was probably a lesson that every swordsman had learned, not to mention that this was a treasured sword passed down from their ancestors. The sword was left in Li Qingshan's hand, but he was sent flying with extremely graceful movements. He could no longer be graceful. His hair was disheveled and he looked extremely pathetic. And all of this happened in the blink of an eye. From the moment young Anji swung his sword, forced Li Qingshan to the wall, and then retreated after being assassinated, only a few breaths of time had passed. The aristocrats were all panicking and could not react in time. Only Liu Hong sniffed and smelled blood. His heart was filled with shock. Young Anji was injured. How did this brat injure him? At the last moment, young Anji had decisively abandoned his sword, but he had also paid a heavy price. Little and still used the spiritual knife to pull out a foot-long wound on his back. Fresh blood was flowing out. Li Qingshan had some admiration for his decisiveness. For the first time, he experienced the emotions described in the books. Even if they were mortal enemies and wanted to kill each other at all costs, they would still be shocked by the skills displayed by the opponent during the confrontation. However, in a battle, he would not be entangled in such emotions, nor would he be entangled in all the right and wrong. Since they had become mortal enemies, killing the other party at all costs was the right thing to do. Chapter 53. The Descending Tiger. Young Anji suddenly thought of the nickname he had originally looked down on, the Descending Tiger, Li Qingshan. Now, what was lunging at him was not a human, but a ferocious beast bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws. Having lost his treasured sword, he was like a child, unable to fight back. He retreated rapidly. The chilly wind swirled up from behind him once again, taking his life. Li Qingshan no longer had any qualms. He swung the ox demon's fist of great strength as he pleased, unleashing a powerful gust of wind. It forced young Anji to dodge everywhere. Little An, who danced about in the darkness, was everywhere, vicious and insidious. One was tough and the other soft, one yang and one yin. They worked together wonderfully. Young Anji was impressive as well. Although he was injured, he still used his supreme movement technique to move about and dodge. However, a few more wounds appeared on his body, and the blood on his back flowed even more profusely. The smell of blood was so heavy that even regular people could smell it. Where is Li Qingshan? Suddenly, there was an explosive bellow from downstairs. It was filled with powerful inner force, so loud that it was like a clap of thunder. Over a dozen torches rose up, illuminating the upper floor. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He signaled to Little An, and the dagger immediately flew back into his sleeves. He did not want anyone to know about this secret for now. Only then did everyone see young Anji's appearance. They were all stunned speechless. Before the torches were extinguished, young Anji had been unstoppable, almost about to kill Li Qingshan. This was in line with their understanding. No matter how powerful Li Qingshan was, he was still a first-rate figure in the Qingyang Society of Martial Arts. However, in the blink of an eye, young Anji had actually been defeated, and he had been defeated so miserably. Young Anji recovered his sight as well. He retreated to Young Jun's side. His face was pale, and his expression was vicious. He wanted to skin Li Qingshan alive. He grabbed Yang Jun and broke out of the window. Li Qingshan said that it was a pity, but he didn't care too much. He stepped onto the windowsill and looked down. Li Qingshan is here. At first glance, he saw the black bear's tall and strong figure, and the black bear also saw him. Their eyes met, and sparks flew. Xiong Xiangwu! Liu Hong exclaimed. Although his foundation was in Qingyang City, he had met this vicious person once before. The Black Wind Mountain bandits have entered the city, someone shouted. First, the aristocrats in the restaurant fell into chaos. Then, the shouts spread far and wide. Li Qingshan gazed over from the tall building. All he saw was that the entire Qingyang City seemed to be in a state of panic. Xiong Xiangwu also stared at Yang Anji in shock. The two of them had received the news together and rushed over to Qingyang City. One wanted revenge, while the other wanted to steal the spiritual ginseng. The Dragon's Gate sect used their superior movement technique to arrive first. They wanted to take the spiritual ginseng and avoid any accidents. Li Qingshan had been silenced by the Black Wind stronghold, which only demonstrated that Yang Anji's "I didn't want to harm you in the first place" was just bullshit. However, Li Qingshan's strength had exceeded everyone's expectations. Yang Anji said, "This kid's martial arts are no weaker than yours or mine, and he still has dirty tricks up his sleeve. Be careful, Stronghold Master." Originally, he did not want to have too much to do with the Black Wind stronghold, but now, all of Li Qingshan's enemies were his friends. The Dragon's Gate sect has colluded with the Black Wind stronghold to attack Qingyang City. Everyone here is a witness. Li Qingshan used true qi to project his voice into the distance. Yang Anji shuddered. He ground his teeth. Li Qingshan, I will never forgive you. That single sentence stripped the Dragon's Gate sect of their reputation as a righteous sect, reducing them to the status of accomplices of bandits. If you're bold enough to do it, then don't be afraid of others talking about it. All right, all right, all right. Stronghold Master Xiong, you've delivered yourself to me. You've saved me quite a bit of trouble. Li Qingshan wrapped his hand around Xiong Xiangwu, trapping him within. Taking advantage of the defeat of the Dragon's Gate sect, he said that with great pride. How bold of you. Xiong Xiangwu's face changed. He leapt up and flew towards Li Qingshan. With his huge body, his movement technique was actually quite impressive. Just when Li Qingshan was about to strike, a figure flashed past him. Liu Hong used the charge of the Iron Cavalry to forcefully clash with Xiong Xiangwu in the air. Xiong Xiangwu landed heavily on the ground, while Liu Hong used the force to return upstairs. Blood surged through both of their faces. Xiong Xiangwu was furious. "You," Liu Hong said, "Stronghold Master Xiong has come to Qingyang City to make a mess. Aren't you showing me no respect?" Just like how every wild beast had their own territory, the people of the Jianghu treated this with even greater importance than wild beasts. They would never allow others to trespass on it. The actions of the Black Wind stronghold had already displeased him as a local tyrant. Of course, if he were a regular person, Liu Hong might not have been willing to stand up for Xiong Xiangwu when he had mobilized so many people. However, just now, Li Qingshan had already demonstrated the strength to make others help him. The second boss, who was dressed like a scholar, said with a sunken voice, "The Iron Fist is opposing our Black Wind stronghold. Aren't you afraid of the destruction of your entire sect?" Liu Hong called out, "Where are the disciples of the Iron Fist?" With that, figures surged out from the streets and alleyways, surrounding the restaurant. They were all disciples of the Iron Fist. They had rushed over after hearing the news. With a single call, hundreds of people responded, and their bearing surpassed Li Qingshan's. The reason why the people of the Jianghu could behave so arrogantly in their own territory was not just because of their martial arts, but also because of the powerful organization behind them. Even if Xiong Xiangwu and Yang Anji worked together, they would have to think twice. Yang Anji suddenly said in a loud voice, "Sect Master Liu, don't you want to know what I'm here for?" Liu Hong raised his eyebrows, showing an interested expression. However, Li Qingshan frowned, but he could not stop Yang Anji from speaking. "It's for a stalk of spiritual ginseng that appeared in the Bailaro Peak." As long as a martial artist absorbs a little of its medicinal properties, their martial arts will improve greatly, and they will have a high chance of advancing to the innate realm. Now that it's in his hands, his martial arts can improve so quickly. Yang Anji pointed at Li Qingshan, his face full of viciousness. He had revealed the location of the spiritual ginseng in front of hundreds of people, and the news would definitely spread like wildfire. At that time, countless people in the Jianghu who longed for the spiritual ginseng would gather like beasts smelling blood. No matter how strong Li Qingshan was, he would be torn to pieces. Everyone's eyes involuntarily looked at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan lowered his eyebrows and did not say anything. He knew that it was futile to defend himself. His martial arts undoubtedly confirmed Yang Anji's words. The worst-case scenario he was worried about had happened, but his heart did not become flustered. Instead, it was unexpectedly calm. I'm already so old. I don't want to improve my martial arts and dominate the martial arts world. As Liu Hong said so, his eyes were searching Li Qingshan's body. Obviously, he did not mean what he said. There was no one in the martial arts world who did not want to improve their martial arts. The spiritual ginseng also has the effect of prolonging life. Don't you care, sect leader Liu? As long as you give the order to capture this brat, the spiritual ginseng will be yours. At that time, Stronghold Master Xiong and I will only seek revenge. We will not fight for the spiritual ginseng. Besides, we won't be able to fight for it even if we want to. Yang Anji demonstrated the terrifying aspects of a sect leader other than martial arts. As expected, Liu Hong was very tempted. Xiong Xiangwu's eyes also lit up. No one knew what he was thinking. In the blink of an eye, it was Li Qingshan who faced everyone again. His eyes were calm, but his mind was anxiously thinking of a way to escape. He did not think that Liu Hong would have any sense of loyalty toward him. Wasn't the reason he was in such a situation because he believed in loyalty? Of course, this was not a hopeless situation. As long as he was willing to give up the spiritual ginseng, he could naturally escape easily. However, he would not do that unless he had no other choice. The magical power of the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers did not focus on qi refinement. The spiritual ginseng could be said to be the greatest guarantee for him to become a so-called innate master. The stalemate was broken very soon. Xiong Xiangwu bellowed out and flew up the stairs again. Liu Hong lowered his head as if he was thinking about something. He did not move at all. At the very least, it was not impossible for him to make up his mind to watch from the sidelines or even kick him when he was down. Yang Anji used this opportunity to apply some golden salve and control his wounds. He was about to strike. Just as Li Qingshan was about to be surrounded by 2 great masters of Qingyang, his muscles tensed up. He was ready to strike. Chapter 54. Xiong Xiangwu half knelt on the ground in a sorry state. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at the top of the restaurant. A tall figure stood there, and the bowstring of the great bow in his hand was still trembling. Although it was not as good as the stone splitter bow, it was still a rare, hard, metal bow. His eyes narrowed. Huang Binghu. Huang Binghu said, "Stronghold Master Xiong, this arrow is just a greeting. I hope you know how to retreat, or don't blame me for being merciless." Xiong Xiangwu broke out in a cold sweat. He knew that Huang Binghu was not boasting. Just now, if Huang Binghu struck out with his full strength, it was extremely likely for him to be shot to death on the spot since he could not turn around in the air. A divine archer who occupied an advantageous position and launched sneak attacks was just too terrifying. Yang Anji said, "You really want to stand up for this kid?" Huang Binghu said, "The spiritual ginseng was indeed found by Li Qingshan, but I've already consumed it and cured my chronic illness of many years. Sect Master Yang, you've found the wrong person." Behind him stood over a dozen headhunters and over a dozen powerful bows. The 4 leading figures of the martial arts community of Qingyang had appeared together, all for the sake of Li Qingshan, whether they were friend or foe. The disciples of the Iron Fist sect were all amazed, while the nearby residents mustered up their courage and opened a sliver of a window, secretly watching this rare sight. The torches danced wildly in the cold wind. Yang Anji, Xiong Xiangwu, Liu Hong, Huang Binghu, and Li Qingshan's expressions flickered. However, they seemed to be frozen without moving. Each of them had their own worries and considerations, holding each other back. No one dared to strike out carelessly. Li Qingshan suddenly laughed aloud. His laughter traveled very far in the cold wind. "Stronghold Master Xiong, this is your only chance to kill me. Why don't you do it? Once I personally kill you, the macaques under your command will still have the opportunity to flee. If you miss out on this opportunity today, I'll just come back in the future and uproot your Black Wind stronghold, leaving not a single one alive." Arrogant. When everyone present heard this, they felt that it was an ear-piercing arrogance. The Black Wind stronghold had wreaked havoc in Qingyang for many years. Apart from the Drawn Reins village who stood aloof from worldly affairs, the Dragon's Gate sect and Iron Fist both wanted to destroy them very much. However, Yang Anji and Liu Hong had both considered that they only had a chance if they worked together. However, even if they succeeded, they would have to pay a heavy price. But now, Li Qingshan actually said that he wanted to destroy the Black Wind stronghold by himself. Even though he had a good opinion of his martial arts, he still felt that he was too arrogant and ignorant. Xiong Xiongwu's face bordered on fury, becoming more and more like a black bear. "Then I'll be waiting for you. If you don't come, I'll make sure not a single person in Crouching Ox Village survives." In the end, he threw down a vicious threat. "No matter who it is that dares to help you, I'll exterminate their entire clan." He left in a hurry with his people. The disciples of the Iron Fist stepped aside and did not stop him. A group of bandits actually treated the entire Qingyang city like it did not exist. They really were lawless. Yang Anji also used his movement technique and vanished into the night. His voice rang out from afar, "Just you wait, Li Qingshan. Your enemies will only increase. Your death won't be far away." Liu Hong clasped his hands at Li Qingshan and left with his people. Meanwhile, the aristocrats were willing to donate 10 times the amount of money for suppressing bandits as long as they spared the disciples of the Dragon's Gate sect and did not involve them. The messy restaurant had already become empty. Only Li Qingshan stood by the window, holding the soaring dragon sword he had obtained from Yang Anji. Huang Binghu brought people over. Li Qingshan turned around and said, "Hunting Chief Huang, I want an explanation." 2 hunters brought over Xiao He who had been tied up firmly. Huang Binghu said, "Kneel and speak." Xiao He told him the entire story in detail. In the end, he said, "Just kill me. I won't regret it." Huang Binghu said with difficulty, "I've watched Xiao He grow up. I can only blame my lack of discipline for this. Please spare him this time." He drew the hunting blade from his waist and stabbed it into his own shoulder. "Hunting Chief," Xiao He said in a hurry. "Xiao He, there are some things that you can't do. I, Huang Binghu, have killed countless people in my life, but I've never been ungrateful, nor have I ever repaid kindness with enmity." Huang Binghu extended his hand, and the hunting chief behind him handed another hunting blade to him with a pained expression. Huang Binghu stabbed it into his left shoulder. Tears streamed down Xiao He's face. He was filled with shame and regret. Ever since he was young, his respect and admiration for this man surpassed even his father's, yet now, he had to watch him suffer for him. Huang Binghu stabbed the hunting blade into his chest. 3 blades and 6 holes, a life for a life. This was the explanation that a person of the Jianghu could give. A hand firmly grabbed Huang Binghu's wrist, and the blade could not stab any further. Li Qingshan was stunned at first before coming to an understanding. The hunting chief wants to take all the blame for this and then end it all with his death. It's useless. Even if they are skeptical, they will still come to me. Huang Binghu let out a heavy sigh. As someone who had traveled the Jianghu, he knew how terrifying this matter was. A secret manual or a treasured sword could stir up a sea of blood in the Jianghu. The lives of those first-rate, or even super-rate experts, were all used as if they were worthless. The red glow in Li Qingshan's eyes disappeared, and he actually revealed a smile. It was not a wild laugh, but a hearty one like a normal youth. "But I'm not afraid of them." These words were said in a hearty and confident manner. Without waiting for Huang Binghu to remind him, he continued, "Is my tiger bone wine ready? I'll have someone send it over tomorrow. Li Qingshan said no more and walked down the stairs. When he was outside the building, he suddenly felt a chill on his face. Raising his head, he saw snowflakes drifting down from the pitch-black sky. A clear shadow flew out from the locust wood tablet and danced around him. Li Qingshan said to himself, I'm not afraid of enemies, I'm afraid of betrayal. He saw Little and looking at him with a confused expression. He could not help but laugh. You won't understand even if I tell you. In any case, you won't betray me, right? Little and might not understand the meaning of betrayal in Li Qingshan's words, but he understood the anticipation in his eyes and hurriedly nodded. Let's go. Tonight isn't over yet. Li Qingshan's eyes burned with a raging flame, as if it could melt this world of ice and snow. Old Knickers drank a mouthful of aged wine and turned on the charcoal in the stove to resist the pervasive winter chill. He had never had a wife in his life and had been the armory guard for several decades. His neighbors had all forgotten his name, only remembering that his surname was Zhong. They all called him Old Zhong or Old Cutoff. Then, for some reason, the children around him began to call him Old Knickers, causing this old man who had been single his entire life to be tainted with a bit of vulgarity for no reason. It was already very late at night, but he still had not slept. As usual, he reviewed his life, as if he was ruminating on the most brilliant parts of his memories, chewing them over and over again while he was tipsy. As for whether these memories were real or fake, they were just like his name. Not only bystanders, but even he himself had no way of distinguishing them. Thump, thump, thump. Several loud noises interrupted his recollection. He unhappily opened the door. Who is it? Why is it so late? Then, he saw a teenager standing in front of the door, giving him an apologetic smile. The county magistrate, Lord Yi, sent me to the armory to retrieve a few things. This is the document. Old Knickers shivered all over. Although there were many false parts in his memories, at least some of them were real. He had really been a soldier and fought in battle, and he had seen the scene of real swords and guns being used to kill people. Although the teenager before him was very young and amiable, he smelled a familiar aura, murderous intent. Murderous intent lingered. It was a feeling that only fierce soldiers who had taken dozens of lives in the army would have. If he encountered such an enemy in battle, he would definitely stay as far away from him as possible. He did not even look at the document in detail. With trembling hands, he took out the key, picked up the lantern, and opened the armory door. The armory door was about 3 meters tall, forged from pig iron. 36 iron nails were lined up neatly, and a pair of tiger heads had iron rings in their mouths. Old Knickers forcefully pushed a few times, but the door did not budge. He awkwardly said, "It seems to be frozen." The teenager placed his hand on the cold iron door and gave it a light push. The iron door opened with a rumble, and he stepped into the armory alone. Old Knickers shrunk his body and waited outside the door. Over the past few years, this was the first time someone had come to the armory to retrieve something. What did he want? And what did he want to do with it? While he was thinking, he heard a clanging sound coming from afar. A figure stepped out of the armory. The black armor wrapped around his sturdy body, giving off a cold and murderous feeling. The armor skirt fluttered along with his movements. Chapter 55. Li Qingshan patted the 3 quiver of arrows on his waist and carried the soaring dragon sword and stone splitter bow on his back. He rested the shockingly heavy and extraordinarily large tyrant's spear on his shoulder and vanished into the snowy darkness. All he left behind was a string of deep footprints in the snow. In the Yamen, the advisor said to Yi Dachuan, "Sir, Li Qingshan won't listen to your advice. There's nothing we can do." As it turned out, Yi Dachuan saw how the aristocrats refused to assist him due to the Black Wind Stronghold's influence. He calculated that he would definitely lose against 200 people alone, so he tried to persuade Li Qingshan to stay and think things over. However, how could Li Qingshan listen to him? He forcefully took the documents and left. Yi Dachuan paced around the room. Suddenly, he stopped and stamped his foot. "Gather people for me," the advisor said in a troubled tone. "How do we have people?" Yi Dachuan bellowed anxiously. "Those country bumpkins actually dared to get their disciples to kill an official right in front of me. The Dragon's Gate sect is a den of thieves. Tell them that whoever refuses to send anyone is a traitor. He understood now. If Li Qingshan died, then he could no longer be the district magistrate. The Black Wind Stronghold and the Dragon's Gate sect might even vent their anger on him. The advisor said, "Sir, please reconsider." If he did that, he would offend all of the aristocrats of Qingyang. Yi Dachuan kicked him in the bottom. "Why aren't you going?" The advisor could only obey. As soon as he left the hall, over a dozen pitch-black figures blocked his way. He had no idea when they had entered the yamen. The advisor was surprised. Using the weak lantern light in the hall to look over, he saw that the dozen or so people all had bows and arrows on their backs. So it's the Drawn Reins village. Good men, what business do you have visiting so late at night? Huang Binghu's shoulder was wrapped in white cloth, but his bearing remained steady. He patted the advisor's shoulder and said, "Sir Yi, Huang Binghu of the Drawn Reins village is willing to lend a hand." After Li Qingshan left, Huang Binghu and the others found an inn to rest. Before they had even fallen asleep, they received news that Li Qingshan had left the city in full armor. Of course, Huang Binghu would not think that he was running away. He suddenly stood up and said, "I'm going out for a while. When I'm not around, Little Black will be in charge of everything." Everyone knew where he was going. Xiaohei said, "Chief Hunter, we'll go with you." After experiencing this, his face lost a lot of the frivolous childishness of youth and gained a lot of the steadiness of an adult. "Prioritize the village," Xiaohei said. "The name of Drawn Reins village was not obtained by compromising. We have formed a great grudge with the Black Wind Stronghold, so we will definitely not be able to live in peace for long. We can only place our bets on that person. If you want me to take responsibility, then this is my idea." Huang Binghu said, "Good. I didn't suffer those 2 slashes for nothing today." Qingyang City that had just quietened down became noisy once more. In Iron Fist, Iron Lion Liu Hong was also awake. Instead, he was thinking about everything that had happened today. Li Long stepped through the door and knelt down. "Master." Liu Hong frowned. "What are you doing?" Li Long said, "Please save the Crouching Ox village, Master." The Black Wind Stronghold had not massacred the village before because they wanted to capture Li Qingshan, the main culprit, first, and also because of his connection with Iron Fist, which was why they had not struck so easily. However, after tonight, everyone would fall out with each other. The Black Wind Stronghold would definitely take revenge madly. They would definitely swing their blades. Liu Hong said, "Go fetch your father's family and caretaker Liu's family." However, Li Long remained kneeling. "Please save the Crouching Ox village, Master. Didn't you dislike that place?" "But that's my hometown." Liu Hong sank into his thoughts for a while as if he was considering the pros and cons of every aspect. Suddenly, he stood up. "Go, gather the disciples." He had already considered the spiritual ginseng that Li Qingshan had brought with him and the wealth of the Black Wind Stronghold. Li Long was overjoyed. "Thank you, Master." Yi Dachuan used his position as district magistrate and borrowed Li Qingshan's prestige and the might of the Drawn Reins village to order the aristocrats to send people. However, there were still some aristocrats who resisted, unwilling to send people. Just as Huang Binghu furrowed his brows and considered whether he should kill them to establish his authority, Liu Hong strode over. He clasped his hands. "Hunting Chief Huang, I've heard a lot about you." Afterwards, he said to the aristocrats who resisted, "Today, I, Liu Hong, swear that I will eliminate a great threat for Qingyang City. If you are willing to assist me, I, Liu Hong, will never forget." What he was trying to say was, even if you are unwilling, I will never forget. Given the current situation, the aristocrats finally dared not resist forcefully anymore. They sent people over reluctantly. Although they were reluctant, they did their best when they sent people. Xiong Xiangwu's words lingered in their ears. If they did not kill the snake this time, they would be waiting for revenge. As a result, they could only do their best. And, with 2 powerful people like Huang Binghu and Liu Hong watching over them, they really did feel like they had an opportunity to flatten the Black Wind Stronghold. The Black Wind Stronghold wreaking havoc was not completely unrelated to them. Just like caretaker Liu's nickname, Half-Village Liu, Most of the land in Qingyang City had been annexed by these aristocrats and local tyrants. Many of the villages that the Black Wind stronghold had plundered were their assets. As for kidnapping and demanding ransoms, who knew how much they had done? Otherwise, they would never have been willing to collect money from the previous district magistrates for suppressing bandits. Xiong Xiangwu had never thought that his threat would instead force the aristocrats into becoming mortal enemies. Yi Dachuan gazed at the people who had gathered in disbelief. It had completely exceeded his initial expectations. There were actually 400 or 500 people. He watched over them in the center with his identity as the district magistrate, while Huang Binghu and Liu Hong commanded him. He had never done something so valiant in his life. His heart that had been blinded by fame and fortune actually began to burn with a sense of bloodlust. The advisor was dumbfounded as well. He thought of a phrase written in a book that was originally very distant from him: with a call from above, followers will gather, and the entire world will rebel. Perhaps all that was needed in the world was a single warrior, a single hero, and they would be able to turn the impossible into the possible, guiding everyone and completing so-called miracles. However, this hero who led the way would usually not have a good outcome. Old Knickers opened the door to the armory with trembling hands. Armor and weapons were taken out one by one, equipping this group of bandits. With a clang, they set off on their journey. Huang Binghu thought, hopefully I can make it in time. This gathering had already taken up far too much time. Liu Hong thought, kid, you better hold on a little longer. Though, if you die, I'll avenge you. Li Qingshan advanced quickly in the darkness. His equipment weighed 100 or 200 kilograms, but not only did it not make him feel like it was tiring, but it instead gave him the pleasure of releasing his strength. His armor was cold, but his blood burned hotter and hotter. His footsteps became faster and faster, and in the end, he was practically sprinting through the wilderness. His heavy footsteps were like war drums, thumping loudly. He did not know how long he had walked in the deep mountains and old forests, but his footsteps suddenly came to a halt. His gaze pierced through the wind and snow like a sharp sword, shooting towards the ravine. A stronghold was creeping in the darkness, and a few faint lights could be seen. The Black Wind stronghold was right in front of him. However, Li Qingshan was in no hurry to go forward. He untied the wine gourd and drank it all in one gulp. The strength he had expended instantly recovered, and there was even a scorching aura rampaging through his body like a wild horse. Chapter 56. The assembly hall of the Black Wind stronghold was brightly lit. The important figures of the stronghold gathered together, currently discussing the matter regarding Li Qingshan. First boss, what do we do now? The kid is currently hiding in Qingyang City, and is under Huang Binghu's protection. Chen Ph. Yang Anji has spread the news of the spiritual ginseng. Who can protect him? He'll die sooner or later. If he dies to someone else, our Black Wind stronghold won't be able to regain our prestige, and the spiritual ginseng will end up in someone else's hands too, said the scholarly second boss. Sure enough, Xiong Xiangwu's eyelids twitched. His desire for the spiritual ginseng was no less than anyone else's. Didn't he say he'd come himself? By then, I'll smash him to a pulp. The seventh boss was a bald fatty. His face was vicious as he swung the huge hammer in his hand. The bosses all looked at one another and sneered, "Seventh brother, only you believe he'll come." As long as they had some brains, they would never believe someone would actually be bold enough to barge into their Black Wind stronghold alone. If he doesn't want to come, we'll force him to come. Although the snow has sealed off the mountains, making it inconvenient for us to mobilize on a large scale, we just need to send a group of people, and it'll be enough to slaughter the crouching ox village and regain the prestige of the Black Wind stronghold. By then, we'll find a few relatives and friends who are close to him and slice them off. We'll send them over piece by piece. I refuse to believe he'll still be able to sit still. The second boss revealed his vicious plan. The bosses all cheered, praising him greatly. The second boss smiled proudly as well. Thump. With a great sound, the entire stronghold seemed to shake. A bandit rushed in and said, "Oh no, boss. Someone's smashing at the stronghold gate." In front of the stronghold, over a dozen bandits guarding the gate stared at it in fear. The gate, made from a few thick logs, was unable to give them any sense of security at all. Thump! Another great sound rang out. The logs trembled and splinters flew into the air as if a huge beast wanted to barge in. Under the constant, violent collisions, the gate caved in and cracked. Boom! The huge logs scattered, and a piece of wood struck a bandit in the chest. He immediately vomited blood and collapsed. However, the mountain bandits did not have the time to pay attention to their companions. Instead, they stared blankly at the entrance. A tall figure stepped into the Black Wind stronghold amidst the wind, snow, and dust. Stop right there, this is Black. A bandit who seemed to be the leader of the group endured the fear in his heart and spoke, but before he could finish speaking, an arrow shot out from the smoke and dust, ending his words and life. Li Qingshan raised his stone-splitter bow and said calmly, "I know." When the dust settled, the bandits discovered that there was no army or huge beasts standing in front of the stronghold gate. Instead, there was only a young man wearing iron armor and holding a large bow. The fear in their hearts immediately faded a lot. Someone brandished his saber and shouted, "He's only one person. Everyone, let's attack together and kill him. The stronghold master will reward us handsomely." More than a dozen bandits wielding all sorts of weapons howled as they charged forward. Li Qingshan calmly took out 3 arrows from his quiver and narked them on the bowstring. In an instant, he pulled the bowstring to its fullest. The bowstring hummed, and the sharp arrows pierced through the 3 bandits at the front with the force of splitting rocks and piercing clouds. They fell to the ground like puppets with their strings cut. Li Qingshan drew his bow like a spring and shot out arrows, killing 12 bandits in a row. "I'll kill you." There were still 4 bandits who charged forward, roaring as they slashed at Li Qingshan's head. Li Qingshan put away his bow and continued forward as if he did not see them. A whirlwind spun around him, carrying with it the sharp edge of a blade. The 4 bandits simultaneously spat out blood from their throats and fell to the ground. One of the bandits was skilled, and when he saw the small blade, he wanted to block it with his saber. However, the small blade cut through his saber like it was tofu. Li Qingshan stepped over the corpses of more than a dozen bandits and continued forward. Finally, he stopped at the empty space in the middle of the stronghold. He saw bandits rushing out from the barracks of every stronghold when they heard the news. They all held torches in their hands, and they were extremely eye-catching in the darkness. He drew his bow and shot out arrows in rapid succession, each one faster than the one before. The effects of the spiritual wine gradually took effect in his body, and he became slightly tipsy. However, it was as if the gods were helping him, and not a single arrow missed its mark. The Hall of Honor landed at the highest point of the Black Wind stronghold. The leaders of the Black Wind stronghold rushed out of the Hall of Honor and looked down from the platform. All of them exclaimed in surprise, "He actually dared to come. And he came so quickly." Li Qingshan suddenly saw that the bandits were no longer charging forward, but were retreating in an orderly manner. He raised his head and saw Xiongwu. He laughed loudly, "Stronghold Master Xiong, a guest has come, and you, as the host, are so slow. I couldn't wait any longer, so I killed a few dozen of your minions to relieve my boredom. You won't blame me, right?" A gust of true qi gushed out, and the laughter traveled 10 miles, echoing through the mountains and drowning out the sound of the wind and snow. It sounded like thunder in the ears of the bandits, and those who were weaker immediately fell to the ground with cries of pain, blood flowing from their ears. "I accidentally killed a few more." Li Qingshan covered his mouth and burped. The bandits were shocked, and Xiongwu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The strength of Li Qingshan's inner force was far beyond his imagination, and it seemed to be even more exquisite than normal inner force. It was definitely not like the rumors said, that he was just an external martial arts master. This must be the effect of the spiritual ginseng. "This day next year will be the day you die. No, I will capture you alive and torture you for 7 days and 7 nights. Li Qingshan laughed loudly, "I don't have the leisure to deal with you. Quickly come down and accept your death." He raised his hand to draw his bow, and the smile on his face disappeared. His right hand turned into a blur, and he mechanically executed the action of drawing an arrow. 7 arrows formed a line. It was the rapid arrow technique that he had learned from Drawn Rain's village, and he shot it towards the platform. Dodge. Xiongxiangwu's warning was too slow. One of the bandits was hit, and he fell from the platform. There were 3 arrows stuck in his body, and he only managed to dodge the first 4. 6th boss. The bandits cried out in alarm. Li Qingshan touched his bow again, and found that all 3 quivers had been used up. He tossed the large bow and quiver to the side. He has no more arrows. Everyone, don't be afraid, kill him. The bandits bellowed out to boost their morale. They swarmed over like a black mass, forming an impenetrable encirclement. Layers upon layers of figures and weapons surged over, drowning Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan hooked the Overlord spear at his feet, and with a clang, he placed it on his shoulder. He spun around like a whirlwind, and the 140 Jin Overlord spear danced like a black dragon, carrying with it a low hum as it tore through the air. 5 bandits were sent flying at the same time, either their heads exploded, or their chests were crushed. They could not be more dead. With Li Qingshan's lethal weapon in hand, he was basically a walking death trap. He would never leave a single person alive. The bandits behind him were smashed into the ground, and there was also a series of groans and cries. Li Qingshan looked towards the platform. Don't let your minions die for nothing. Quickly come and fight me. Xiongxiangwu looked at the casualties of his subordinates, but he did not have the slightest intention of making a move. Instead, he laughed coldly. Fight you? Looking down from above, he could clearly see a dozen or so bandits dressed in special clothing, mixed in with the crowd, approaching Li Qingshan. They did not raise their weapons like their comrades, but instead lowered them. Li Qingshan's heart trembled. A terrifying killing intent was like a venomous snake bearing its fangs. And the experts that he would take seriously were clearly only on the platform. Before he could think carefully, the dozen or so bandits raised their hands and shouted, "Get out of the way!" Chapter 57. The bolts tore through the air. They were no weaker than the stone splitter bow. With a clang, they pierced the armor and stabbed into Li Qingshan's body. Li Qingshan immediately froze up. Xiongxiangwu sneered. Do you really think you're worthy of fighting me? Dying like this would be letting you off easy. He had gone to great lengths to obtain these crossbows. He had spent a great deal of time training these crossbowmen as well. They were the true trump cards of his Black Wind stronghold. He had gone too far. The other organizations of Qingyang City treated him as a thorn in their side. If they were not prepared, they would not be able to sleep at night. Even first-rate masters would struggle to escape death from the sneak attack of over a dozen crossbows. And then, Li Qingshan, who was supposed to be dead, suddenly raised his head and asked. The bolts struck the armor, but they failed to pierce his tendons. He had also become covered in cold sweat. If it were not for the armor, which nullified the force of impact, he definitely would not have been able to block the crossbows with his ox demon forges its hide. Even with that being the case, it took him quite a while to recover. Crossbows were truly a divine weapon for killing masters. Protect the crossbowman. Fire again. The second boss ordered loudly. The bandits surged forward, and the crossbowmen changed their bolts in a hurry. Crossbows were easy to use, but they were nowhere near as fast as bows, so they were extremely easy to damage. However, with this kind of command, they could unleash their greatest power. They could command the bandits like an army. Total annihilation. How could Li Qingshan be willing to become a target? He identified the place with the most bandits and used the tyrant spear style, charging over like a chariot. The might of the spear surged, sucking in over a dozen bandits. He was like a black dragon that had swallowed its prey in a single gulp. When it spat out again, it was over a dozen corpses. With just these people, how could they stop him? Before a crossbowman could even draw the bowstring, his chest was pierced by the spear. His 50-kilogram body was thrown into the air, slamming into another crossbowman in the distance and killing him. Li Qingshan became one with his spear and rushed left and right in the crowd. He only attacked and did not defend. When the swords, spears, swords, and halberds landed on his body, they were immediately repelled by his armor and could not harm him at all. When he swung his great spear, it pierced through the chest and head. In a short moment, He had killed dozens of bandits, and more than half of the crossbowmen had been killed. He stood among the bandits, his iron armor pierced by more than 10 crossbow bolts and soaked in blood. A fierce and murderous aura arose spontaneously, scaring the bandits to death. One of the bandits tried to launch a sneak attack from behind. He turned around and glared at him, a red light flashing in his eyes. Before he could make a move, the bandit's face suddenly turned ashen, and he was scared to death. Xiongwu's heart ached and he flew into a rage. Even if he won this time, his vitality would be greatly damaged. The faces of the other leaders were also unsightly. This Li Qingshan's martial arts were so high that it could be said that it was beyond their imagination. The second leader said, "Leader, don't be anxious. This Li Qingshan has a great spear and armor. Although he looks invulnerable and powerful, he has to carry several hundred kilograms of weight. Even if his martial arts are high, he cannot last for long. Why don't we wait until he is tired and then make a move? We can just recruit more subordinates." In a battle between experts, it was rare for a battle to last for 3 days and 3 nights. In fact, it was rare for a battle to last for more than the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. This was because a battle was fierce and dangerous. One careless move could determine life and death. Martial artists had to burst out their physical strength and willpower in an instant, suppressing their opponent with a spurt of energy. Xiongwu calmed his heart. He thought that even if it was him, after shooting the stone splitter bow dozens of times and charging with this kind of equipment, he would not be able to last long. Even if a person had great abilities, once their physical strength was exhausted, they would be at the mercy of others. This was the fissomeness of a battle formation. It was not just a saying that ants could bite an elephant to death. However, who would have thought that not only was Li Qingshan not tired, he became more and more courageous as he fought. The gourd of spiritual wine he had drunk had a shocking medicinal effect. As it burned in his body, energy continuously surged out. The overlord's spear in his hand turned into a blur. The spear moved with him as he killed to his heart's content. His entire body was bathed in blood. Furthermore, the ox demon's fist of great strength that he cultivated was not something that a mortal martial art could compare to. The thing that bulls were most praised for was not their strength, but their endurance. Seeing more and more bandits die and corpses litter the ground, the second leader's forehead was covered in sweat. What's going on? The snow was getting heavier and heavier. It was as big as a goose's feather as it fell to the ground, covering thousands of mountains. The bandits that fell towards Li Qingshan were immediately swept away by the fierce spear wind. A bandit was sent flying and landed on the ground, dyeing the snow red. The remaining bandits no longer had the slightest bit of ferocity and retreated in panic. Li Qingshan paused the spear in his hand. "What a heavy snow!" Xiongwu decisively ordered. "Attack!" Together with the other leaders, they flew down together. The bandits' morale was immediately boosted. The seventh leader smashed down with his hammer. The air whistled, and before it even smashed down, it brought along a violent gust of wind. Its power was astonishing and terrifying. He was born with great strength that could kill tigers and bears. The second leader said, "Don't fight him head on, come at me." Li Qingshan used the move Overlord carries the cauldron, and the Overlord spear swept upwards. Clang! A loud sound rang out as the hammer and spear collided. The hammer flew back and smashed into the seventh leader's head, causing his brain to burst out. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the fourth leader whipped at Li Qingshan's waist. The fifth leader used a demon-headed blade to hack at Li Qingshan's back. The second leader, however, used an iron fan to hide in the momentum and viciously pointed at the back of Li Qingshan's unguarded head. However, the most dangerous thing was still Xiongwu's palm that was reaching for his face. Even if Li Qingshan could block these attacks with his ox demon forges its hide and iron armor, the impact would still be unbearable. His body would slow down, and he would fall into a trap if he was not careful. He finally understood why even a veteran like Liu Hong's expression changed when he said he was going to flatten the Black Wind stronghold. He refused to believe it. The danger was unimaginably great. Ox demon stomps the ground. An idea occurred to him. True Qi surged into his right foot, and he stomped heavily on the ground. Within a radius of 3 meters, a small earthquake occurred. The ground cracked and sunk, and shockwaves rolled in all directions. Martial arts focused on strength from the ground and rooting under one's feet. As long as one had not become an immortal that could ride the wind and soar the clouds, they would not be able to leave the ground under their feet. The attacks of the leaders were like the wind, but their feet were firmly planted on the ground. As soon as Li Qingshan's foot landed, they immediately became unsteady. They felt a shockwave attack their feet, and they felt dizzy and wanted to vomit blood. Their attacks were also scattered and powerless, and when they landed on Li Qingshan, they were no longer effective. Only Xiong Xiangwu's martial arts were the highest, and his palm and claws still maintained their power. Li Qingshan laughed and quickly retreated, avoiding Xiong Xiangwu's claws. He crashed into the fourth leader behind him, and at the same time, he stabbed his spear at Xiong Xiangwu's chest. The fourth leader screamed in pain. All the bones in his body were shattered, and he was sent flying. Xiong Xiangwu pulled back his palm and twisted his body, temporarily avoiding Li Qingshan's dragon-like spear. The fifth leader's martial arts were the weakest, and he had not recovered yet. Li Qingshan let go of the spear and grabbed his head, swinging it to the ground. With a bang, it was like a watermelon being split open, and red and white blood flowed out. He then pulled the Overlord's spear back, and held it horizontally in front of him, assuming the stance of the Overlord's cross. In the blink of an eye, he had broken through the attacks of the Black Wind stronghold, and even killed the 4 leaders. Third-rate experts were as weak as children in front of him, unable to withstand a single blow. The remaining bandits were stunned as if they had been immobilized. They did not expect their own stronghold to be so weak as the village they had wreaked havoc in. The snow was getting heavier, and the ground was dyed red with blood. Then, it was covered in snow and frozen, forming a tragic scene of red and white. Chapter 58. Li Qingshan kicked away the corpse by his feet and grinned. "It's much quieter now. Come, Chief Xiong, I'll give you a quick death." He tilted his head slightly. "And the one behind me. Come at me as well." The second boss, who was dressed like a scholar, no longer had any hint of elegance. The scarf on his head had fallen off, and his entire body was drenched in cold sweat. He had managed to escape from Li Qingshan's hands thanks to his decent movement technique, but his courage had already been shattered. When Li Qingshan glanced at him, he took a step back as if he had been struck by lightning. "Chief, I don't want to die here. I can't let my strategy go to waste." After saying that, the second boss turned around and fled. His body was light, and with a few leaps, he arrived at the entrance of the stronghold. The other bandits scattered as well, fleeing towards the stronghold's entrance. "Trash. All of you are trash." Xiong Xiangwu cursed loudly. If it were not for Li Qingshan stopping him, he would have personally killed these traitors. The instant the second boss was about to escape from the Black Wind stronghold, a dark green blade silently slid past his neck. Firstly, he was not as skilled as Yang Anji, and secondly, he had already lost his courage. He only cared about running for his life, so how could he guard against the small blade in the darkness? Blood sprayed out, and his pupils dilated. Even at the moment of his death, he did not know who had killed him. The other fleeing bandits all followed in his footsteps. The pitch-black stronghold's entrance seemed to have become the border of death. Xiong Xiangwu could not see what had happened in front of the stronghold's entrance. He could only vaguely hear the sounds of heavy objects falling to the ground. He knew that those people had probably died. He felt a chill run down his spine. "What did you do?" Li Qingshan smiled in a flamboyant manner. "I killed you, of course." After cultivating the path of white bone and great beauty, Little An was no longer afraid of blood. However, just now, when he fought, his killing intent surged into the sky like a battle formation. Little An could only wander around in the surroundings, unable to get close. However, it was perfect for him to launch a sneak attack. Those bandits that were running around in the dark were simply the best prey. They didn't have the slightest ability to fight back before him, and they stretched out their necks one by one to be executed. Xiong Xiangwu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The foundation he had built up for so many years had been destroyed in a day, destroyed in the hands of this brat. All the mountain bandits were guilty of crimes, and he was the only one left. The large black wind stronghold was reduced to a ghostly wasteland in an instant. Only the howling of wind and snow remained. Li Qingshan raised his spear and said, "Come." Staring fixedly at Li Qingshan, Xiong Xiangwu reached his trembling hand into his bosom and took out a pale yellow paper talisman with great care. He had obtained this talisman by accident and it was not easy. It was the real life-saving straw. He did not expect that it would come to this, so he did not have the time to use it. But now, he could not care so much. Li Qingshan could clearly see the bright light on the paper talisman. His heart trembled, and the tip of his spear trembled. True Qi gushed out, and he used the final move of the Overlord Spear technique. It was also the most powerful move, world domination. He charged forward, piercing through the air. Xiong Xiangwu bit the tip of his tongue and spat it on the paper talisman. He flipped his hand and pressed it against his chest. A ball of light exploded, enveloping him. He shouted, "I'm going to kill you." Clang. The sound of metal clashing rang out. The invincible Overlord Spear was blocked by a layer of golden light, unable to move an inch forward. Little An wanted to help Li Qingshan, but under the illumination of the golden light, he could not take a single step forward. Xiong Xiangwu grabbed the tip of the spear, and Li Qingshan felt a huge force that was not any weaker than his own. He almost lost control of the spear. He immediately used the ox demon stomps its hooves, and his feet bit the ground. His gaze was as resolute as a dragon, and he did not take a single step back. The two wrestled, and the iron spear, which was as thick as the mouth of a bowl, was twisted into an exaggerated arc. The distance between them gradually closed. 5 steps, 3 steps, 1 step. Xiong Xiangwu suddenly raised his palm and slapped down on Li Qingshan's head. His hand was shockingly large, like a bear's palm fan. It did not match the proportions of his body, and now it was enveloped in a layer of light, making it seem even larger. Before the palm even arrived, the whistling wind forced Li Qingshan to be unable to breathe. He let go of the Overlord Spear and retreated. He was scratched by the edge of the palm, and his heavy armor was torn apart like paper. He felt an intense pain in his chest, and it was even more severe than when he was cut by a sword. Bang! Xiong Xiangwu seemed to be unable to control his own strength. He slapped the ground, and a loud sound rang out. The ground collapsed, and the momentum was even greater than Li Qingshan's just now ox demon stomps its hooves. Li Qingshan finally could not help but be shocked. What is this? How could Xiong Xiangwu explain? He roared, "It's time for you to die." Vajra Strength Talisman. Once used, it's as if there's a Vajra protecting your body, giving you infinite strength. Oxen appeared out of nowhere and explained indifferently. A bull that could talk. Xiong Xiangwu was instantly stunned. "Brother Bull, why are you here?" Oxen said, "Hurry up and kill him, we still have important matters to attend to." "All right." Li Qingshan grabbed the remaining armor on his body and tore it off. He strode toward Xiong Xiangwu. "What Vajra protection? Watch me break your turtle shell." Xiong Xiangwu's fan-sized palm slammed down, thinking that Li Qingshan was seeking his own death. The true qi in Li Qingshan's body surged violently. Ox Demon Fist of great strength struck out with all his strength. The fist and palm collided, and a loud sound rang out. Under Li Qingshan's feet, the ground collapsed, and the rocks shattered. All the bones in his body groaned in pain, and his muscles became numb. However, he did not care, and shouted, again. He punched out again. Boom! The giant palm slammed down, and Li Qingshan sank a few more inches into the ground. Xiong Xiangwu wanted to smash Li Qingshan into pieces, but Li Qingshan was like a piece of pig iron. No matter how many times he tempered him, he became more and more courageous. The fist and palm clashed more than 10 times, and Li Qingshan's calves were all buried in the ground. Blood seeped out of his mouth and nose, but his expression became more and more determined. Xiong Xiangwu was, after all, borrowing external force. Although he had infinite strength, his speed of recovery could not keep up. Finally, he revealed an opening. How could Li Qingshan let go of this opportunity? He punched out again, but it was once again dissolved by the spirit light. It's useless, you can't hurt me. Xiongxiangwu laughed wildly. Let's see how many punches you can block. Li Qingshan did not give his opponent any time to breathe. His true qi exploded, and he continued to punch out more than 10 times. The spirit light trembled and became fainter. Xiongxiangwu retreated, and a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. Clearly, the spirit light could not completely dissolve the fist force, and his lungs were injured. Xiongxiangwu was beaten until he knelt on one knee. He angrily and unwillingly said, "You die." Li Qingshan pulled out the flying dragon sword on his back and poured all of his true qi into it. The sword vibrated, and a foot-long sword ray appeared. He slashed down with all his strength, cutting into the spirit light. After a moment of hesitation, it smoothly cut down. A head fell to the ground, and it spun a few times. There was still shock and fear on its face. Li Qingshan raised the sword and said, "The Black Wind Stronghold's leader has been beheaded. The Black Wind Stronghold has been destroyed." Then he flicked the sword. What a good sword! He did not use this sword from the start, but first used his fists to consume the spirit light of the talisman. Otherwise, when the spirit light was at its peak, not only would he not be able to kill Xiongxiangwu, but he would also destroy the sword. Although according to Oxen, this was also a fake spirit weapon that did not make the grade, at least it was more practical. "Brother Nyo, what is the important matter you mentioned?" Chapter 59. Only then did Li Qingshan remember what Oxen had said. Using beast blood was only a temporary measure to cultivate the path of white bone and great beauty. If he truly wanted to cultivate it, he needed human blood, and it had to be human blood that had just died and was still warm. The stronger the blood, the better. These bandits were great materials that Oxen had mentioned. Although he did not dare to agree, he did not mind it too much. He moved the corpses of the bandits over and piled them up into a small mountain on the empty ground. The scene was horrifying, and the stench of blood was thick and pungent. Even Li Qingshan himself felt rather shaken. He could not help but ask himself, "Did I do this?" However, he immediately calmed down. This was karma. If these bandits did not end up like this, then the world would be unfair. As long as he had a clear conscience, there was no need for him to feel conflicted or regret. Afterwards, he followed Oxen's instructions and placed the jar containing Little An's white bones upside down on the mountain of corpses. Little An danced around nervously until he heard Li Qingshan say, "Go." He turned into a breeze and dove into the jar. The mountain of corpses trembled. The blood that had been flowing downwards suddenly began to flow backwards towards the jar. The jar also began to tremble violently, and the stench of blood grew fainter and fainter. After a long while, there was a series of cracking sounds. Cracks appeared on the jar, revealing streaks of red light, as if they were congealing blood. Li Qingshan frowned and held his breath. The scene before him seemed too much like some kind of terrifying and evil ritual. It was as if some kind of demon was about to be born. With a bang, the jar exploded. A blood-red skeleton sat on the mountain of corpses. 2 balls of blood-red flames burned in its eye sockets. It was clearly an extremely strange and terrifying scene, but the little skeleton's hands were pressed together like an old monk sitting in meditation. It actually gave off a holy feeling of enlightenment, as if it had seen through life and death. The horrifying mountain of corpses vaguely seemed like a lotus throne where a Buddha sat in meditation. The pale white arms that stretched out were like pure white lotus petals. It was extremely strange. Li Qingshan called out tentatively, "Little An?" The little skeleton raised its head and the blood flames flickered. It turned into a blood shadow and pounced over. Its speed was so fast that even Li Qingshan was taken aback. This was even faster than Yang Anji's lightness skills. He instinctively wanted to block or even counterattack, but he stopped himself and allowed the little skeleton to barge into his arms. It then slammed into his chest with a thud and slid down. Li Qingshan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He saw that Little An had fallen to the ground and was shaking her head. She looked like she couldn't control her speed at all. Little An stood up and looked up at Li Qingshan. From his eyes, he saw his current appearance. It was as if he suddenly realized that he was no longer a ghost. He looked down at his tiny, bony hands, and then at his body. Then, he began to tremble violently. Then, he squatted on the ground and covered his face with his hands. Although there wasn't any sound coming out, Li Qingshan could clearly feel that he was crying. As a ghost, at least he still had a human form. No one would be able to remain calm after turning into such a horrifying, inhuman appearance. Not to mention that he was just a child. Li Qingshan felt a pain in his heart. His heart that was as hard as iron in the massacre suddenly softened. He rubbed his sour nose and squatted down with a smile. He touched Little An's head and said, "Why are you like this? Aren't you pretty cute? In the past, only you could touch me, and I couldn't touch you. Now it's fair." Little An raised his head. The blood flames in his eye sockets were a little brighter. He stretched out his arms and gently hugged Li Qingshan. He put his head on Li Qingshan's chest. Li Qingshan spread out his arms and hugged him tightly. In the wind and snow, under the mountain of corpses, a teenager and a small skeleton were hugging each other. They seemed to feel a kind of warmth from each other's cold bodies. Oxen looked on silently from the side. There was no longer the usual mocking look in his eyes. Little An had the temperament of a child after all. His mood quickly improved. He curiously experimented with his new body. One moment, he would randomly walk on the ground. The next moment, he would pick up a single blade that the bandits had dropped and swing it wildly. Sometimes, he would leap several feet into the air, but inevitably, he would fall down with a thud and fall to the ground. Li Qingshan was greatly alarmed. He was afraid that Little An would fall and shatter his slender bones. However, he saw Little An turn over and stand up. Scratching his head, he remembered that he was no longer a ghost and couldn't fly. However, he wasn't disappointed and continued to run wildly in the wind and snow. Only then did Li Qingshan relax. He revealed a smile. Perhaps it was because he loved the house and its crow. He really didn't think that Little An was scary. The little skeleton's various childish movements actually had a strange kind of cuteness. However, other people definitely wouldn't think so. He turned to Oxen and asked, "Is Little An going to be like this for the rest of his life?" Oxen said, "There's nothing wrong with this. How many people pray to the gods and Buddha to become like this, yet they still can't? However, allowing a yin spirit to cultivate a physical body is something that normal people can forget about. Although it's an ability of the demonic path, it isn't countered by any Buddhist or Daoist arts. Moreover, it progresses at a godly speed and is extraordinarily powerful. If this ability were to spread, I guarantee that it would be 10,000 times more effective than the spiritual ginseng in your possession. Whether it's Buddhists, Taoists, or demons, they would all come to steal it. If someone else gave you a feast, could you still blame the cutlery for not being good?" Li Qingshan could only smile bitterly. "I knew it. The path of white bone and great beauty sounds much more powerful than the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers. Not only was it so fast that he almost failed to react to it, but when he turned around, he saw Little An swinging the 7th boss's huge metal hammer that weighed around 50 kilograms. Then, due to his hands being too small, he lost his grip on the handle. The metal hammer flew several dozen meters away and crashed into a wall. The current Little An could slaughter the entire Black Wind stronghold alone. He would definitely be able to do so with even more ease than Li Qingshan. Moreover, the master of the Black Wind stronghold had somehow found a talisman that could contend against his strength of 1 ox. For a bandit leader like him to obtain it, it definitely could not be anything impressive. He could not help but feel a hint of doubt towards the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers. He absorbed the essence blood of over 100 people, so of course he's not weak. If he wants to revert to human form, it's actually not difficult. Oxen snickered and changed the topic, ignoring Li Qingshan's doubts. As expected, Li Qingshan threw his own matters to the back of his mind. "Is that true? What should I do?" Oxen said, "Firstly, once you cultivate the path of white bone and great beauty to a certain level, you'll be able to transform into anything. You'll be able to transform into anything you want." Li Qingshan nodded. The Buddhists speak of skeletons made of powder. They've always been able to see through reality and illusion, but this probably isn't something that can be achieved in a short period of time. After all, it's an illusion. Oxen said, there's another shortcut. That's by using the blood of others. Before long, you'll be able to regrow flesh from white bones, regrow flesh, and reconstruct a physical body. Li Qingshan said in shock, doesn't that mean Little and has come back to life? Oxen shook his head. He's neither alive nor dead, neither dead nor alive, but from a mortal's point of view, there's no difference from coming back to life. All right. Li Qingshan felt excited. Don't celebrate too early. You'll have to handle this troublesome matter. You can't expose him before everyone and leave behind too many traces. Otherwise, don't blame me for not warning you when people come knocking on your door to purge demons. Chapter 60. Oxen said nothing more. Only when Li Qingshan turned around did he say, you can practice the tiger demon's fist of bone forging once you get back. Training an ox without training a tiger still isn't an ability. Li Qingshan paused, but he did not stop. No matter where this path led to, he would continue onwards without looking back. It was for himself, as well as for the child in front of him. Oxen placed all of his attention on Li Qingshan. He had taught Little and the path of white bone and great beauty because of Li Qingshan. Was the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers he had taught Li Qingshan really just a clumsy, mediocre ability? Li Qingshan searched through the Black Wind stronghold for spoils of war. Little and followed behind him with a series of thuds. Very soon, he found a granary. The granary was filled with food that had been plundered from various villages, prepared for winter. Who knew how many people had died of hunger and cold? Afterwards, he found a warehouse filled with various miscellaneous items, as well as an armory. The warehouse was mostly filled with things like alcohol, meat, salt, and so on. The armory was filled with regular weapons, and none of them were on par with the soaring dragon sword in his hand, so he did not take them seriously. However, he was unable to find the most important treasury no matter how he searched. Instead, he found quite a lot of silver and banknotes in the rooms of the various bosses. The Black Wind stronghold had been in Qingyang for many years, so who knew how much gold and silver they had accumulated? There might even be talismans among them. In the end, it was Little and who was more meticulous. He discovered an extremely well-hidden mechanism in Xiong Xiangwu's bedroom. Activating the mechanism, a secret door appeared. Opening the secret door, the gold and silver utensils shone with jewels and jewels, almost dazzling him. A wooden box contained a stack of silver banknotes, which amounted to over 10,000 taels. However, the most valuable items were probably the paintings and antiques that he could not name. Even Li Qingshan felt rather dazzled. He casually picked up an item, yet he would spend half a day admiring and fiddling with it, highlighting his true colors of a country bumpkin. Even with his 2 lives combined, he had never seen so much gold and silver. Unfortunately, he couldn't find the other talisman after searching for a while. He thought that if Xiong Xiangwu really had such a good thing, he would have kept it with him as a trump card. He wouldn't have left it in such a place to rot. He couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Little and didn't care about the gold, silver, and jewelry, as if he was tired of playing with weapons. Instead, he took out the paintings from the big porcelain bottle in the corner of the treasury and looked at them. However, he didn't look like he was playing with them. Instead, he looked at them seriously. Some of the scrolls were just thrown to the ground after a single glance, as if they were fakes. Li Qingshan went up, but he saw that the paintings were either elegant landscapes, flowers, birds, and people, or they were written in some strange calligraphy style. He couldn't understand 9 out of 10 words. In any case, they were all ancient, and he couldn't tell the difference. Suddenly, he remembered that he was basically illiterate in this world. There was no chance for him to learn in the mountain village, nor was there a need for him to learn. He probably couldn't even recognize all the words. He would have to make up for this when he had the chance. However, he was very surprised. You can understand them? Little and nodded. Although he couldn't speak, he gestured at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan understood very quickly. As it turned out, Little An had remembered many things after he achieved initial mastery of the path of white bone and great beauty and turned into a skeleton. Li Qingshan clicked his tongue and said, "Looks like you might be able to remember where your home is very soon. You can appreciate paintings at such a young age, so you must have a very profound family background. Perhaps you're not from an ordinary wealthy family." Hearing Li Qingshan say that, Little An became confused instead. Even though he was naive, he knew that his current appearance was shameful. Even if he could find his way back to his home, would he be able to see his family? Li Qingshan comforted him. "Don't worry, I have a way. You'll be fine very soon. I guarantee that you'll be no different from other children." Little An immediately became happy. Although he had no idea what Li Qingshan's method was, he trusted him instinctively. Hearing this from outside, Oxen was surprised. This was not just from an ordinary wealthy family. This little ghost soul had clearly been cleansed and strengthened by someone's power, which was why it was so tough. He was able to withstand the witch's random refinement, and his soul did not disperse. Instead, he had the ability to control objects. Perhaps Li Qingshan did not know, but Oxen knew very well just how high the path of white bone and great beauty demanded in terms of talent. Even he was rather surprised that Little An was able to grasp it so smoothly. This was probably not just because he was talented, but because he had used some sort of spiritual medicine or technique to awaken his spiritual intelligence. Little An unfurled another scroll painting, and a spiritual light suddenly rose up in the room, overshadowing the brilliance of all the gold, silver, and jewels. Li Qingshan felt a chill in his heart. He sensed an extremely sharp sword qi assaulting him. It was actually 10 times more terrifying than when he faced Yang Anji's fatal strike in the restaurant. He instinctively grabbed Little An and pulled him behind him. The scroll painting fell to the ground, but it did not unleash the terrifying attack he had imagined. After resting for a moment, Li Qingshan carefully picked up the scroll, only to find that it was not a painting, but calligraphy. The calligraphy was extremely messy, and he could not even recognize a single word. It did not really look like cursive calligraphy. There were no characters in the entire scroll, only random strokes and strokes. However, the force of the strokes penetrated the back of the paper, making it look extremely imposing. Every single stroke was like a sword mark left behind by a supreme swordsman on a stone wall. There was a depth to it that would not be worn away even with the passage of time. Oxen said, "Kid, you're quite lucky. You actually found a true spiritual artifact." A spiritual artifact. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. He played with the scroll painting in his hand, his heart filled with joy. He rubbed Little An's bony head. "What a good Little An." Little An saw that he was happy, and also lowered his head in joy. "How do I use this thing?" Oxen said, "Try injecting your true qi into it." Li Qingshan had fought a great battle in the Black Wind stronghold. He had mainly relied on his own strength, so he did not consume much of his true qi. He still had more than half of it left. However, when he tried to inject his true qi into the scroll painting, the true qi in his body poured out like crazy, and all his true qi was sucked into the scroll painting. When his true qi was completely depleted, a stroke on the scroll just now lit up. With a flash of light, a skimming flew out, passing through a gold and silver treasure chest, and landed on the stone wall of the secret room. There was no shocking sound. After a while, the treasure chest split into two. Only then did Li Qingshan come back to his senses. He went forward to take a look, and saw that as long as the skimming passed by the gold and silver ingots, they would all be cut in half. The cut surface was clean and shiny. He then went to check the stone wall, and found that there was an extremely thin and deep mark on the thick stone wall. Chapter 61. Li Qingshan finally understood why Oxen didn't like the shining knife, and even disdained the flying dragon sword, which was regarded as a godly weapon by ordinary people. Compared with real spiritual weapons, they were indeed inferior. If Xiong Xiangwu used this spiritual weapon, he would be the one who died here today. However, ordinary martial artists would not be able to see the spiritual light. The antique calligraphy and paintings here were not collected by Xiong Xiangwu, that uncouth man. Instead, It was the second boss who was dressed like a scholar. He could see that this calligraphy was somewhat extraordinary, but he could not tell what was so extraordinary about it. Even if he could see it, ordinary martial artists couldn't use spiritual weapons with their internal energy. Xiong Xiangwu had to bite his tongue and use his blood to activate the magic charms. Once this scroll was rolled up, it didn't show any light, which benefited Li Qingshan. Oxen said, "It seems that this spiritual weapon is not complete, but only a part." Li Qingshan took a look. Indeed, many strokes were broken at the edge of the paper, as if they were cut by someone. Oxen had a good eye. This spiritual weapon doesn't seem to be made on purpose, but more like it was drawn randomly. The sword chi and sword momentum were integrated into the tip of the brush to stimulate the sword chi. If you want to, you might be able to learn a sword art from it. Also, once a spiritual weapon is cut, it will be destroyed. The person who wrote this calligraphy is really something. Li Qingshan knew Oxen's temperament very well. He was always arrogant, so saying something was already a great comment. Li Qingshan looked at the calligraphy more carefully, trying to learn a sword art from it. He thought that since Shapotian, as an illiterate, could understand the Ode to the Gallant, which even the martial artists couldn't understand, he, as a semi-illiterate, should have some advantage. However, he couldn't find anything. The more he looked, the more he felt it was powerful, so he had to give up. Little and stared at the scroll, and the bloody flame flickered. Suddenly, he picked up a scroll on the ground and waved it in the air. A gust of wind rose in the treasury, and the scroll brought up a series of after-images, making whooshing sounds in the air. It was as if the scroll in Little An's hand was not a scroll, but a real sword. The little skeleton holding the scroll and waving it around should have been strange and amusing, but in Li Qingshan's eyes, he could faintly see an elegant swordsman waving his sword around. He couldn't help but murmur, "Fairy tales are all lies. What do you mean by an illiterate learning martial arts faster? It's all nonsense." Oxen glanced at Li Qingshan and clicked his tongue. Comprehension. Li Qingshan didn't think that his comprehension was bad. He had made rapid progress in the Ox Demon's Fist of great strength, and had even been praised by Oxen. If it wasn't a problem with him, then it could only be said that Little An's comprehension was really too high. Of course, it might also be because he knew calligraphy. After Little An finished the last move, he resolutely put away his sword. The scroll broke into pieces and turned to dust. Then, he looked at Li Qingshan. Although he couldn't even make an expression, the bloody flame was clearly flashing with the emotion of "Come and praise me." Li Qingshan touched his skull. So smart. Little An immediately became happy. Seeing that Li Qingshan was a little hurt, he wrote on his palm, "I'll teach you." Li Qingshan smiled. "All right then, it seems that I still have a lot to learn. But first, I'll help you find a new home." From the antique vases, he found a thick porcelain jar and weighed it. "It seems too small." Xiaoan split up into pieces again and flew in with a clatter, which made Li Qingshan leap in fright. He glanced into the jar and saw a tiny skull with a pair of blood-red flames staring at him with great interest. All right, he thought that raising a little ghost was strange enough, but now it seemed to be getting stranger and stranger. He said, "Good night," and sealed the jar. Li Qingshan picked up the jar and stuffed the banknotes into his bosom. He only brought the scroll out. Then, he sealed the secret room again. Finally, he found some kerosene. Other than the granary and the warehouse, he sprinkled it on every camp and started a big fire. Since ancient times, killing and arson were always linked together. Even in the wind and snow, the fire quickly spread. In the blink of an eye, it had become a huge fire, causing Li Qingshan's face to turn red. Li Qingshan then sprinkled the kerosene on the mountain of corpses. No one knew if these corpses, which had their essence blood sucked out by Little An, would be noticed by others. So, he decided to just burn them as well. On the mountain path, after a difficult night of marching, the bandit hunting squad finally neared the Black Wind stronghold. Just when Huang Binghu thought it was too late, a red light suddenly shone from the horizon. He was shocked. Could it be? He immediately ordered, "Hurry up." After crossing a mountain ridge, Huang Binghu was stunned. Liu Hong was also stunned. Even the people who had rushed to the mountain ridge with them were speechless. The insufferably arrogant and infamous Black Wind stronghold was currently burning, turning into a sea of fire. Could it be that this was all done by that person? This question arose in everyone's hearts. After recovering from their shock, the squad charged down the mountain ridge at their fastest speed. They arrived in front of the Black Wind stronghold and hesitantly passed through the broken stronghold gate. Then, they saw a scene that they would never be able to forget for the rest of their lives. Within the sea of fire, the snow on the plaza was dyed bright red by blood and flames. All sorts of broken weapons were stabbed into the ground. Li Qingshan sat in the center, repairing himself. Behind him was a mountain of burning corpses. 400 to 500 people stopped. Huang Binghu and Liu Hong were no exception. This youth exuded an aura that made people not dare to approach him, as if he was a demon god. Li Qingshan opened his eyes. "You're here." 2 balls of fire were reflected in his clear eyes, but it made people feel as if the fire had been ignited from the bottom of his heart. No one answered him. Li Qingshan had killed people, set fires, and tested arcane artifacts. He had completely depleted all of his physical strength and true qi. As soon as he sat down, he felt a deep sense of exhaustion, so he just meditated and rested. Within the sea of fire, the best place for him to rest was this empty space. Even he had never thought he would give others such an impact. As a regular person, Yi Dachuan did not understand as much as Huang Binghu and Liu Hong. He went up and asked, "Did you do all of this?" However, he never dared to look at the mountain of corpses behind Li Qingshan the entire time. The scorching sensation and the smell of roasted meat made him dizzy. Li Qingshan nodded and leapt up. "Li Qingshan has destroyed the Black Wind stronghold here. I have fulfilled my promise to the people of Crouching Ox Village, to Sir, and to myself." Huang Binghu and Liu Hong, on the other hand, noticed the crossbows among the scattered weapons. They understood the terror of these things the best. Just what kind of martial arts gave him such strength? Liu Hong knew he could not do what Li Qingshan had done. Even if the bandits did not move at all and lined up for him to hit, he would still be exhausted, not to mention that the bandits wielded various weapons and had many masters watching over them. Chapter 62. Thank you, everyone, for your assistance. Li Qingshan thanked Yi Dachuan, Huang Binghu, and Liu Hong one by one. No matter what their motives were, help was help, and their reward was the remaining granaries, warehouses, and armory of the Black Wind stronghold. As for the treasury, it had always been well hidden. With the fire, even the secret door had been destroyed. If they wanted to enter again, they could only move the rubble, find the right position, and force their way in. Everyone in the bandit hunting army was beaming with joy and sighed in relief. They had originally been worried, thinking that they would have to fight the Black Wind mountain bandits to the death. Now, they could move the spoils of war without a drop of blood on their swords. It was great. They could even brag to others when they returned. Yi Dachuan, Huang Binghu, Liu Hong, and Li Qingshan stood together and watched everyone move the items. Li Qingshan seemed to be the leader. Other than the wine gourd at his waist and the flying dragon's sword on his back, Li Qingshan also had a new porcelain jar at his waist and a painting scroll on his back. Naturally, the porcelain jar contained little Anne. He had absorbed the essence blood of so many bandits in one go, so he needed some time to digest and absorb it. As for the painting scroll, it was a spirit artifact he had obtained. Because it was calligraphy and could emit sword chi, he named it the cursive sword calligraphy. These 2 items attracted the attention of the other 3, but he did not say, and no one tactfully asked. No matter what it was his spoils of war, and he could not allow others to touch it. Li Qingshan said, "Chief Hunting's injuries are not serious, right?" Huang Binghu said, "Don't worry, my blade is accurate. There won't be any injuries." Li Qingshan was startled, and then he laughed loudly. As expected of an experienced person. The human heart was complicated. It was moved by emotions and changed by benefits. There was falsehood in the truth, and truth in the falsehood. Right and wrong, gratitude and grudges could not be calculated, and there was no need to. With a smile, all gratitude and grudges were forgotten. Huang Binghu also laughed loudly, but he suddenly withdrew his smile. But the difficult part is yet to come. Little Black walked up and bowed deeply to this person who was about the same age as him. I've let you down. Today's scene had thoroughly shocked him. If such a person became an enemy of the Drawn Reins village, how terrifying would that be? Li Qingshan patted his shoulder and walked out of Black Wind Stronghold. It's almost daybreak. Beyond the layers of red clouds, a bright light appeared in the east, and the fire was gradually extinguished. Li Qingshan suddenly stopped in his tracks. By the way, hunting chief, did the nickname Descended Tiger come from you? Maybe. Huang Binghu did not expect him to say this. Li Qingshan said, can you change it? Huang Binghu was startled, then smiled bitterly. This kind of name was spread among the people of the Jianghu. He had merely happened to be there, so how could he have the right to change it? Li Qingshan didn't know that he would soon have a new title. Black Tiger Li Qingshan. Yi Dachuan felt a deep regret at not being able to find the treasury of the Black Wind Stronghold in the end, but he did not show it on his face. Occasionally, his gaze would meet the advisors, and they were both excited and overjoyed. A great merit, a great merit. Even though it was Li Qingshan's doing, Li Qingshan was the constable he had found, so he, as the county magistrate, could not miss out on the credit. He was already imagining the expression of his cheap brother-in-law, who looked down on him, when he received the news. Ha 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 ha, the Black Wind Stronghold that several county magistrates could not quell was quelled by me as soon as I took office. Yi Dachuan laughed wildly and patted Li Qingshan's shoulder. Of course, this is all thanks to you, Constable Li. I will definitely report this to the magistrate, who is my brother-in-law, to commend you for your contributions and help you get promoted and rich. Ha 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 ha. Constable Li? Li Qingshan only just remembered that he had this title. He smiled and said, thank you, Lord Yi, for your praise. Not a problem, not a problem. The army set off to return to the city. Li Qingshan had nothing to do, so he followed the army slowly. Along the way, everyone discovered that he was not as terrifying as they had imagined him to be. They gradually gathered around him, calling him constable and young hero. Even Li Qingshan, who had never experienced such treatment before, felt extremely satisfied. Compared to his mediocrity in his past life, the Crouching Ox village was in dire straits. This was what a good man should be like. He definitely did not pretend to be aloof or be indifferent to fame and fortune. Not only did he love fame and fortune, but he also loved wine, meat, and beauties. He had everything in the world. Huang Binghu bid farewell and returned to the Drawn Reins village to retrieve the tiger bone alcohol that Li Qingshan wanted. Li Qingshan said, if you have any ginseng, feel free to send it over. I'm willing to buy it for a high price. After dealing with this matter, he could truly begin practicing the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. Although Oxen was very secretive about it, Li Qingshan could sense that this ordinary-looking ability contained mysteries that he had yet to comprehend. And, even if it really was just an ordinary ability, it was not something that any martial arts could compare to. It was extremely important to him. Although he was greedy for fame and fortune, he wasn't blinded by it. Dao Daoran had forgotten where he was. The current prosperity was just the calm before the storm. There were more and bigger challenges ahead. If he didn't prepare in advance, he would be defeated. However, not only did he not feel fear, but he even became slightly excited. He was just short of yelling for the storm to come even fiercer. This was the life that he had chosen. Although the roads were easy to travel during the day, they were unable to move quickly because they were carrying a great pile of supplies. Only when evening arrived did the group arrive at the city gates of Qingyang City. Just now, did they hear the deafening sound of gongs and firecrackers. Li Qingshan asked, is there a festival today? Liu Hong said, no, it must be to welcome you. The district magistrate has sent people back to report this beforehand. Sure enough, as soon as they entered the city, a warm aura flooded their faces. Despite it being winter, the streets were packed with people. What had happened in Qingyang City last night had shocked everyone in the city. As a result, everyone had been rather absent-minded during the day. Only when the news arrived did the entire city erupt into an uproar. Li Qingshan smiled and welcomed the crowd. At the same time, he could clearly sense a few hostile gazes from the tea house on the side of the street. He thought, they've come so quickly. TMPH, frogs at the bottom of a well. We've just destroyed a stronghold. Senior brother, when do we do it? In the tea house, a woman in blue with a plain appearance but brimming with arrogance said. There's no hurry. Let's wait a little longer. The senior brother who sat before her was a horse-faced man in his 30s. He was in his 30s, but his fingers were long and slender. His waist bulged, and his eyes shone brightly. He could tell with a single glance that he was a master of hidden weapons with great inner force. We've made it just in time. If the news spreads, who knows how many people will come to steal it. Why don't we strike first and gain the upper hand? I don't think I can kill 200 bandits by myself. The descended tiger is in full swing right now, so he'll be difficult to deal with. The horse-faced man shook his head. They had only managed to come across this opportunity in Qingyang City, so they wanted to take advantage of it. Chapter 63. It's better to be cautious in the Jianghu. It's better not to get the spiritual ginseng than to put yourself in danger. There are other people here, let them test the waters first. The long-faced man's earnest advice only made the lady in blue look down on him. Master said that you have to listen to me when you're outside. The long-faced man was also angry. If you want to die, go ahead. Don't drag me down. If you're not Master's daughter, I would have left long ago. He was deeply aware of the dangers of the Jianghu. If he was not careful, even if he managed to get the spiritual ginseng, he would probably be killed. If Li Qingshan was a clever person, he would immediately offer up the spiritual ginseng, or he would be dead for sure. No, even if he did offer it up, the person who received it would definitely silence him to prevent the news from leaking out and being hunted down by everyone. The long-faced man looked at Li Qingshan in the crowd as if he was looking at a dead man. He took a sip of tea. Even if he couldn't get the spiritual ginseng, it would be a wonderful thing to see such a lucky young talent die in the dangerous Jianghu. It was the restaurant where the intense battle had taken place last night again. Li Qingshan sat in the seat of honor, receiving the fearful gazes of the aristocrats and cup after cup of fine alcohol. When he drank a cup, he suddenly stopped and looked at the rippling alcohol in the cup. Following his movement, the restaurant quietened down. A aristocrat asked carefully, Arrester Li, what's wrong? Li Qingshan said lightly, this wine is poisoned. He casually poured the wine on the ground. White smoke immediately rose, showing the intensity of the poison. This poison was colorless and odorless. If he hadn't activated his spiritual eyes and been careful enough to see the strangeness in the wine, he would have been poisoned by now. The aristocrat's face turned pale. He was the one who poured the wine for Li Qingshan just now. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, it wasn't me. Li Qingshan suddenly stood up. When the aristocrat was about to cry for help, he saw Li Qingshan look at the waiter at the side. You're the one who poisoned it, right? This was almost beast-like intuition, a sensitive reaction to killing intent and hostility. I don't think I've seen him before. He's not the waiter here. A aristocrat said. The waiter panicked and cried out for his innocence. Suddenly, he saw a fist hurtling towards him. Before the fist had even arrived, the gust of wind from it had already rushed over, suffocating him. He could no longer afford to hide anymore. A dagger slid out of his sleeve and stabbed towards Li Qingshan's abdomen viciously. With a dull thud, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking, the waiter's chest caved in. His body flew out of the building and landed on the street. He still held the knife tightly, its tip bent. Li Qingshan behaved as if nothing had happened. He turned around and said, let's keep drinking. He knew this was not even an appetizer. But no one could drink. Li Qingshan said, Sir Yi, the sect master of the Dragon's Gate sect, Yang Anji, has publicly assaulted and killed an official, and has now fled. Have you issued a warrant for his arrest? Yi Dachuan said, yes. I will definitely mention this in the official document I send to the prefect. We cannot stay for long in a den of bandits like the Dragon's Gate sect. As a constable, I am willing to wipe out the Dragon's Gate sect and capture Yang Anji. What do you think, Lord Master? The aristocrats were horrified. The Dragon's Gate sect was probably going to follow in the footsteps of the Black Wind stronghold. Fortunately, most of them had summoned their descendants back as soon as possible. Yi Dachuan looked at the sky and said, "Is it too late?" Li Qingshan said, "Thank you for your concern, Lord Master. I'll be back soon." Since he could not drink, he would find something to do. He would not let the culprit behind all this go, the Dragon's Gate sect. He would not give his enemies a chance to rest and recuperate. Comrade Lei Feng had once taught us to treat our comrades as warm as spring and our enemies as cruel and merciless as winter. The Dragon's Gate sect sat on the Dragon's Gate mountain 5 kilometers away from the city. When Li Qingshan left the city gates, he did not take the main road. Instead, he made his way up the Dragon's Gate in a hurry. As soon as he made it out of the city gates, 2 black figures tailed him, but they were not the senior brother and junior sister. They just happened to be in the vicinity of Qingyang City and had heard the news of the spiritual ginseng. The waiter who had poisoned the spiritual ginseng happened to be their companion. He had been waiting below the restaurant the entire time, waiting to poison Li Qingshan to death and flee immediately after obtaining the spiritual ginseng. If they failed, the 3 of them would take action together. However, all they saw was the waiter's corpse being tossed out. Afterwards, Li Qingshan leapt out of the window as well, heading straight out of the city. They looked at one another. His escaping. They could not help but follow him. Although the straight-line distance was 5 kilometers, he had to traverse mountains and ridges along the way, so it was not a measly 5 kilometers. Li Qingshan strode forward, leaving behind a deep footprint with each step. When he came across ditches and ridges, he would slow down and stop for a moment. As it seemed, there was a reason why people described him as clumsy and heavy. This was because the ox demon's fist of great strength focused on practicing the body, not qi. It did not have any techniques to lighten the body or lift qi at all. He only channeled true qi into his feet instinctively when he ran, allowing him to move slightly faster. But at this moment, his situation was a little special. His spine was twisted in a strange way, and he kept adjusting his body as he ran, as if he was stretching his waist. His neck was also constantly twisting, and he was also panting heavily. His heart was beating like a drum, and white steam rose from his body, but it was actually his sweat. Running should have been effortless for him, but he actually felt like he was bearing a great burden. However, his footsteps became faster and faster. With each step, he seemed more graceful. His body bent forward as his arms drooped down. He was like a humanoid wild beast, running through the forest faster and faster. In the pitch-black forest, the trees rapidly approached him before being quickly thrown behind again. Suddenly, a precipitous hill that stood 20 to 30 meters tall appeared before him. If it were him in the past, he definitely would have stopped and thought about how he could make his way around it or climb up. But now, not only did he not stop, but he even sped up towards the hill. As soon as he reached the bottom of the hill, he lowered his body and pushed off with his feet, leaping up. He extended his hands and grabbed 2 protruding rocks. With another push, he leapt up the hill. The entire movement was completed in a single stroke, just like a vicious tiger scaling a mountain. This form was the tiger demon climbs the mountain from the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. Oxen had already passed on the tiger demon's fist of bone forging to Li Qingshan. He had spent the entire time on his way back to Qingyang City studying it. With the accumulation from the ox demon's fist of great strength, it was much easier. He grasped the method very quickly and experimented with it as he ran. These were the 3 most basic forms of the 9 forms of the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. The tiger demon flexes its spine, the tiger demon stretches its back, and the tiger demon bumps its head. These were the foundations of the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. The other forms used them as a foundation. Chapter 64. However, increasing the burden on his body wasn't a bad thing. In fact, it was a great thing. Although Ox Demon's fist of great strength bestowed extraordinary strength, endurance, and defensive abilities, he often felt that it was a waste. His strength was great, but if he wasn't fast enough, it would be useless if he couldn't land a hit. That was why he had no choice but to take the risk when dealing with young Anji. With greater endurance, he could hold out for longer, but in a life-and-death battle, it was all about the speed of a spark and myriad changes in the blink of an eye. If he didn't land a hit, he would flee 1,000 miles away. There weren't many opportunities to fight for 3 days and 3 nights. With a strong defense, he could bully experts who used their fists, but if he used a sword or sharp blade, he might not be able to withstand the so-called needle-pricking cowhide. Moreover, it was better to hit someone than to take a beating. However, Tiger Demon's fist of bone forging solved these problems from the root. It allowed him to explode his strength and stamina in an instant, greatly increasing his speed. Other than Tiger Demon climbs the mountain, there were 2 other forms of Tiger Demon's fist of bone forging. Tiger Demon leaps over the ravine and Tiger Demon descends the mountain. They contained all the movements of leaping up and down, pouncing forward and retreating. It was truly like a ferocious tiger passing through the forest, coming and going like the wind. Li Qingshan stopped in his tracks and let his wildly beating heart slowly calm down. He closed his eyes and tried to comprehend the feeling of just now. At the same time, he was also waiting. The 2 black figures' qigong was actually quite good. After a while, they walked out of the forest. Using the bright snowy light, they immediately saw Li Qingshan on the hillside. At the same time, they felt a fierce and dangerous aura. Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed. "You're just 2 third-rate masters, yet you're bold enough to chase after me. How bold of you. Since you've come, then leave your lives behind." Before the 2 of them could reply, he immediately shifted from stillness to lunge down. Tiger Demon descends the mountain. The descended tiger, Li Qingshan. However, the 2 of them remembered Li Qingshan's nickname at the same time. Not only did Li Qingshan find this nickname unpleasant, but even they found it hilariously tacky when they first heard it. However, when the shadow approached them, neither of them could laugh. They hated themselves for believing in the rumors and getting greedy. They didn't expect Li Qingshan, a fledgling, to be so strong. Young Anji released the news of the spiritual ginseng, but he definitely wouldn't mention the scandal of him being played mahjong. As for the matter of Li Qingshan destroying the Black Wind stronghold by himself, because it was too bizarre, they didn't believe it either. They only saw Li Qingshan return to the city with 2 famous experts and several hundred people. It was already too late to escape. Tiger Demon steals heart. Li Qingshan's hands formed claws and pierced into their chests. With a grab and pull, he pulled out 2 blood-red hearts that were still beating. In addition to the 3 basic moves of strength training, Tiger Demon flexes its spine, Tiger Demon stretches its waist, and Tiger Demon touches its head. There were also the 3 sweeping moves of Tiger Demon leaps over the ravine, Tiger Demon climbs the mountain, and Tiger Demon descends the mountain. The Tiger Demon fist of bone forging also had 3 moves that were purely used to kill and injure. They were Tiger Demon steals heart, Tiger Demon rips the goat, and Tiger Demon roars. It was several times more ferocious than the Ox Demon fist of great strength. Little and, come. The porcelain jar opened and Little and flew out. The blood color on his body had faded, leaving behind only a layer of red. He had basically returned to the appearance of a white skeleton. Li Qingshan clenched his fist. Blood dripped onto the white bones and instantly seeped in. This was the so-called blood of a living person. Such a cultivation method was evil and terrifying to the extreme. However, Li Qingshan didn't feel the slightest discomfort. It wasn't just because these 2 people wanted to harm him and there was nothing wrong with killing them. He smelled the thick stench of blood and a cruel delight surged from the bottom of his heart. The red light in the depths of his eyes also became more and more dazzling. In the eyes of mortals, oxen had always been relatively honest and docile creatures. Although they had their moments of violence, they couldn't compare to tigers that hunted for food. It was the same for the fist techniques named after these 2 beasts. If the Ox Demon fist of great strength had only strengthened his bloodlust, then the Tiger Demon fist of bone forging had completely stimulated the murderous nature in his heart. Those who were good at fighting liked to fight, and those who were good at killing liked to kill. This was the common sense of the world. Li Qingshan used his blood-stained hand to rub Little Un's head and said gently, "Come out and get some fresh air." Although he didn't know how a skeleton could get some fresh air, Little Un still happily climbed onto Li Qingshan's shoulder. Li Qingshan took off, but he didn't know that not long after he left, another two people rushed over. They were the long-faced man and the woman in blue from the tea house. The two of them were experienced in the Jianghu after all. They were not the scions of the Dragon's Gate sect. Even the woman in blue paled slightly when she saw this scene. HMPH, the three banes of Yao. To think that these three pieces of trash would dare set their sights on the spirit ginseng. Senior brother, he left the city to challenge the Dragon's Gate sect. This is a good opportunity for us. Once both sides are heavily injured, we'll be the Oriole behind them. We'll take the spirit ginseng and leave. Shut up. The long-faced man squatted down to examine the corpse. When he heard the woman in blue's plan, he cut her off with a livid expression. "Let's go. We'll leave now. The further we go, the better." The woman in blue shouted, "What did you say?" Although the three banes of Yarrow are not impressive figures, they do have some skills. Ignoring the fact that the three banes are skilled in poison, the martial arts of the first and second banes are pretty good. Even if they worked together, I would have to put in a lot of effort. However, now that I'm on guard, I can't even withstand a single black tiger steals the heart before my heart was dug out. This Li Qingshan is not someone we can deal with. The rumors of the Black Wind stronghold might be true, the long-faced man said calmly, but his voice trembled slightly. The horse-faced man spoke calmly, but his voice was slightly trembling. He could imagine what would happen if he were to be incited to attack. We're using hidden weapons to launch sneak attacks. Are we supposed to fight him head-on? As long as we use our movement techniques to open up a distance, it will be fine. Senior brother, you're really too cowardly. Riches come from danger. If we obtain the spirit ginseng. The woman in blue chattered on. When she mentioned the spirit ginseng, her eyes lit up. Pa. There was a clear slap. The woman in blue covered her face in disbelief. You actually dared to hit me? The long-faced man said, if you want to die, go by yourself. Don't drag me along. Go back and tell Master. Let's see if Master will punish me or praise me. He swung his hand and left. The woman in blue was stunned for a while, but she still chased after him. Senior brother, how can you do this? The Dragon Gate mountain was towering on the ground. The mountain was steep and precipitous. There were cliffs on three sides, especially on the east side. It was as if it had been chopped out by an axe. The cliff was several hundred feet high. It was straight up and down. Even monkeys would find it difficult to climb it. However, at this moment, the dark eastern cliff flickered with sparks of fire as it flew up quickly. Chapter 65. After killing the three evils of Yarrow, Li Qingshan rushed through the mountains and forests. There were no longer any obstructions. He crossed the rivers he came across and crossed the ridges he came across. His usage of the Tiger Demon's fist of bone forging became more and more ingenious. In less than 2 hours, he arrived at the cliff to the east of the Dragon's Gate. The mountain stabbed into his face like a sharp sword. He immediately thought about what to do as his body and mind sped up towards the cliff. 300 meters in the air, the wind whistled past his ears, but he ignored it. His eyes were as sharp as needles as he searched the cliff nervously, searching for a rock he could grab onto. Even if it was just an extremely small protrusion, he could use it as leverage. When he ran out of leverage, he would grab onto the cliff viciously. If the cliff was treated as flat ground, then Li Qingshan would be like a huge tiger with his back hunched and forelimbs on the ground. However, he seemed like he was walking on flat ground, graceful and at ease. Only he knew that he was treading on thin ice, putting himself in danger. The slightest mistake would make him fall from several hundred meters in the air. Even with his body of steel, he would be smashed to pieces. It was no less dangerous than the Black Wind stronghold. However, he was fearless. Instead, his blood surged. The extreme danger had squeezed out all of the potential in his body. His spirit, willpower, and vigor had all reached unprecedented heights. He finally understood where the joy of those mountaineers who risked their lives to scale the highest peaks lay. He understood why there were people who liked extreme sports. To challenge difficulties and obstacles and achieve what others could not achieve had always been the nature and instincts of a hot-blooded man. He ignored the constant signals of exhaustion from his body, and he ignored the groans from his bones that could not hold on any longer. His body overloaded instead brought him the pleasure of releasing his soul, like flying. Suddenly, a valley appeared before him. He leapt as hard as he could, and only when he saw the buildings did he suddenly realize that this was not a valley, but a mountain peak. The world in his head flipped once again. He landed on the cliff on one knee and stood up to look back. The mountains were like beasts. The tiny Qingyang city was surrounded by these beasts as if it was in danger of being ripped to shreds at any time. This was not a world where people could live in peace. It was filled with unimaginable danger. During the decade or so he had spent in the Crouching Ox village, he had grumbled countless times. He missed the comfortable rooms of his past life, where he could eat various foods, and spend an entire day in front of his computer. Even after the appearance of oxen, which could be described as great power, he still hesitated inside. He was comparing the two lives. Which one was better? Only tonight did he suddenly get the answer. He cut off the last shred of hesitation and opened his arms as if to embrace the world. This is the life I want. This is the adventurer's paradise. The biting cold wind made the young man's clothes flutter. On this cliff, he made an end to his past life, to the old dream that had haunted him for 15 years. I am Li Qingshan, the Li of Muzi, the Li of Li. Where in the world is there not a lush mountain? Little and crawled out of the jar as well. He stared at Li Qingshan blankly. Although he had no idea what he was thinking, he seemed to sense his will. He thought to himself, no matter where you want to go, I will accompany you until the end. Li Qingshan turned around resolutely and made his way towards the buildings and halls. That was where the Dragon's Gate sect stood. It was already quite late, but the soaring dragon hall of the Dragon's Gate sect was still brightly lit. The sect master, Yang Anji, sat in the seat of honor. Beside him was the pale-faced, resentful Yang Jun. The elders and core disciples of the sect stood to the two sides. They were all stern, and none of them said anything. Even the roaring flames could not warm their hearts. The Black Wind stronghold had been destroyed by Li Qingshan. This piece of news weighed on everyone's chests like a boulder. The Dragon's Gate sect was quite impressive. Li Qingshan had only returned to Qingyang City in the evening, but the news had already reached the Dragon's Gate sect in the evening. It was quite fast. Yang Jun roared out with a twisted face, "That's impossible. It must be a rumor. It's only been a day. It's not like the Black Wind stronghold is made of paper. How could they be destroyed?" Jun, stop talking. It's the army of Qingyang City, and there's Liu Hong and Huang Binghu working together too. It's no surprise that the Black Wind stronghold has been destroyed. I just never thought it would be so fast. Yang Anji truly lived up to his reputation as the sect master of a sect. He was still able to maintain some composure after hearing about such a great event. An elder said, "I never thought Liu Hong and Huang Binghu would work together to help that kid. Senior brother, what do we do now? Many aristocrats have summoned their descendants back." "What do you mean help that kid?" "It's just for the treasures of the Black Wind stronghold. They won't spare the Dragon's Gate sect. This is basically an unprecedented disaster for our Dragon's Gate sect." The Dragon's Gate sect had been established for many years now. Although it had never been a large sect of the Jianghu, it did possess a very deep foundation in Qingyang. Martial arts and influence combined to form an absolute ruling force. Right now, they were like a local tyrant who had been living comfortably, suddenly hearing that the entire world was revolting. They basically felt like the end of the world had arrived. "Senior brother, I've said long ago that we need to restrain our disciples from running amok. If they run amok like this, they'll provoke powerful enemies sooner or later and bring great trouble to our Dragon's Gate sect." Although the disciplinary elder said this to Yang Anji, he was looking at Yang Jun. The others all showed resentment too. "Old bastard, what nonsense are you spouting? Your idiotic son has someone else's wife and daughter come looking for them. Who stood up for them? Young Jun was furious. Normally, he would never speak to his seniors like that, but he had suddenly lost his martial arts. Even the Dragon's Gate sect that protected him might not be able to protect him anymore. He had lost his mind, so he no longer cared. You. The disciplinary elder's face reddened. All of you, shut up. Young Anji's voice boomed through the hall. His inner force could not be underestimated. Is now the time for internal strife? No matter what happened in the past, the priority right now is to deal with the crisis before us. I've already sent disciples to guard the mountain path and pass on the news with torches. If someone attacks the mountain en masse, they definitely won't be able to hide from us. If we really can't stop them, we can only retreat through the secret passageway in the ancestral hall with our savings. We'll abandon the Dragon's Gate mountain and preserve our strength. At the end of the day, the Dragon's Gate sect was a sect that had existed for several generations. Apart from the young masters of aristocrats, there were still many loyal disciples who served them. However, these disciples never imagined that their sect master had already made plans to abandon them. Abandon the Dragon's Gate mountain. Everyone in the hall was shocked. They had thought of the worst-case scenario, but when they suddenly heard it, they still struggled to accept it. I'm only talking about the worst-case scenario, and it's only a temporary plan. I've already sent letters to all the members of the Martial Arts Society, both orthodox and evil. Everyone has already learnt about the news of the spiritual ginseng. Before long, Qingyang City will be filled with people of the Jianghu. Not only will the kid be dead, but even Liu Hong and Huang Binghu might die a violent death. As long as we preserve our strength, we'll be able to make a comeback before long. Chapter 66. Young Anji's expression changed drastically. He had not sensed Li Qingshan's arrival at all. Li Qingshan raised his leg and strode forward. He no longer seemed clumsy. Instead, he was as light and silent as a feline. The other elders and disciples were still wondering who he was. Young Jun roared, "Li Qingshan!" Everyone in the hall stood up at the same time, pressing down on their swords. There was a flurry of discussion. What are the disciples guarding the mountain doing? How did you get up here? Who else? Get out here. You don't have to worry about how I got up here. I'm the only one here today. Li Qingshan looked around and saw that there were many people he did not know. He said, "I'm only here today to kill the culprit. The rest of you can leave the hall. I'll give you 10 minutes. He turned to the side, making way for the door behind him. However, what he received in response was the sound of swords being drawn. Eerie sword light flickered. The disciplinary hall elder said, "There's a path to heaven, but you chose to barge in instead. To think that you dared to sneak up the mountain alone. Do you really think that our Dragon's Gate sect is a pushover?" He was in charge of punishment and was known for his callousness in the Dragon's Gate sect. He looked at Li Qingshan like he was looking at the disciples who had offended him. Kill him. He's our Dragon's Gate sect's greatest enemy. If not for him, the Dragon's Gate sect wouldn't be where it is today. How dare he send himself to our doorstep? We can't let him off so easily. I want to chop off all his limbs. Originally, everyone had almost fallen out with each other, but due to the appearance of the culprit, Li Qingshan, they banded together. They wanted to unleash all of their fury on him. They were tempted to cut him to pieces and cut him to pieces. To them, Li Qingshan, who had come alone, was already a piece of meat on the chopping block, ready for them to do as they pleased. Only young Anji remained silent. He gripped his sword hilt tightly, sensing the changes in Li Qingshan. Originally, Li Qingshan was like an iron rod. Although it was powerful and heavy, it lacked variation and sharpness. As for the current Li Qingshan, he seemed to have been sharpened and revealed his ability, causing others to raise their eyebrows. Li Qingshan said with a calm expression, "Then, the Dragon's Gate sect will be the next Black Wind stronghold." Killing intent surged in his heart, and his entire body surged with killing chi, pressing towards the people of the Dragon's Gate sect. Such a heavy murderous aura. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts, feeling as if the temperature in the hall had suddenly dropped by a few degrees. Yang Jun, who had been crippled of his martial arts, almost collapsed to the ground. Li Qingshan took advantage of this opportunity and used the tiger demon leaping over the ravine to pounce on the Dragon's Gate disciple closest to him. There was a distance of more than 10 steps between them, and Li Qingshan closed the distance in an instant. He used the tiger demon digs out the heart to swipe at Li Qingshan, and the sound of his 5 fingers tearing through the air was terrifying. Even a lion would use its full strength when hunting a rabbit. It would never rely on its advantage to waste words with its enemy. That disciple had not expected Li Qingshan to suddenly attack. In his shock and fear, he could not even use half of his strength. He could only watch as Li Qingshan's hand reached into his chest and dug out a bloody heart before casually tossing it aside. Xiaoan leapt up and caught the heart in his hand, absorbing the heart's blood. Ever since he learnt from Li Qingshan that there was a chance for him to recover his body of flesh and blood, he had done this with the attitude of completing a sacred ceremony. 2 balls of fire flashed in Little An's eye sockets as he swept his gaze across the people in the hall. As long as he killed this group of people, he would be 1 step closer to his goal. No matter the price, he wanted to appear before Xiao Chen with a physical body again. Everyone from the Dragon's Gate sect had reacted when Li Qingshan killed that disciple. However, they came to an abrupt halt as they looked at this strange scene in horror. Beside the flickering candlelight, a skeleton was holding a human heart and devouring it. Only 2 words appeared in their minds. D-Demon. Since Little An no longer possessed the ability to conceal himself, there was no need for him to do so. Li Qingshan drew the ancestral sword of the Dragon's Gate sect, the soaring dragon sword, and stabbed it into the ground. I've long heard that the Dragon's Gate sect is famous for its sword arts. Little An, come and have a spar. Little An tossed the heart aside and grabbed the soaring dragon sword. The sword was a little too big for him, but the moment he grasped the hilt, his aura changed. He was like a peerless swordsman. The tip of the sword pointed diagonally, and every single person from the Dragon's Gate sect felt like they were enveloped by the sword's aura. The Discipline Hall elder's face was pale. He no longer had the confidence he had just now. As a member of a sword sect, no matter what kind of person they were, they still knew their stuff when it came to sword techniques. The person who had left behind the sword aura and sword intent on the scroll was someone who could draw a spirit artifact and was praised by Oxen. Even though Little An had only comprehended a portion of the sword technique from it, it surpassed all the sword techniques of a second-rate sect like the Dragon's Gate sect. The marble tiles beneath Li Qingshan's feet shattered, and he vanished from where he stood. He used the tiger demon leaping over the ravine again, ignoring everyone else in the hall and going straight for the sect master of the Dragon's Gate sect, Yang Anji. Yang Anji shouted, "Kill him!" His voice jolted everyone in the hall back to their senses. They were swordsmen who had practiced the sword for many years, so they would not be truly intimidated. They knew that this was a moment of life and death. Their eyes reddened, and they used their full strength. Over a dozen streaks of sword chi pierced towards Li Qingshan, who was in midair and had nowhere to go. Li Qingshan did not dodge or dodge. He did not even glance at the sword flashes. His pupils narrowed to the size of needles as he stared at Yang Anji like a ruthless wild beast. Yang Anji's sword was finally unsheathed. It was another treasured sword that flashed with spiritual light. Although it was slightly inferior to the soaring dragon sword, it still had the ability to cut through metal and jade. It manifested 7 layers of sword silhouettes, creating 7 sword flowers that attacked Li Qingshan. Even if the other swords could not pierce through Li Qingshan's skin, this sword would definitely take Li Qingshan's life. Just as Li Qingshan was about to make a move, Little An suddenly rushed out from below. The soaring dragon sword also manifested 7 layers of sword silhouettes, creating 7 sword flowers that clashed with Yang Anji's sword, producing a series of sharp clangs. Behind Little An, the group of Dragon's Gate elders and disciples froze like statues, maintaining the posture of stabbing at Li Qingshan. Horrifying wounds appeared on their necks, chests, and foreheads. Blood spurted out of their mouths at practically the same time as they fell to the ground. The instant Li Qingshan made his move, Little An held the soaring dragon sword and attacked at the same time. However, He stayed close to the ground as he passed through the hall. While everyone was attacking Li Qingshan with all their might, he instantly killed all the elders and disciples. Then, he faced young Anji's sword. He was not a child, but a demonic cultivator who cultivated demonic arts. The soaring dragon sword was not a toy either, but a terrifying weapon that could take someone's life. When Little An first mastered the path of white bone and great beauty, Li Qingshan had once said that he could probably flatten the Black Wind stronghold alone. Now that he had comprehended the sword techniques of a spiritual artifact and used a weapon like the soaring dragon sword, Little An had finally seen just how powerful he was. This kid. Their martial prowess had gradually surpassed the realm of second-rate experts. This was the Jianghu. Under the suppression of absolute martial prowess, numbers were basically useless. Chapter 67. Young Anji saw the hall littered with corpses. The Dragon's Gate sect's legacy had ended in his hands in the blink of an eye. This was because Li Qingshan had been a weakling in his eyes back then. Dealing with weaklings was not called provoking, but taking advantage of. However, today, young Anji had become the one being taken advantage of. After exchanging blows with Little An, young Anji managed to escape from death, just in time to avoid Li Qingshan's full-powered pounce. Otherwise, if Li Qingshan used his moves, he would be confident of seeing the color of young Anji's heart. As for Little An, he had instantly killed 10 people and knocked away young Anji's sword. He was also at the end of his tether, unable to catch up immediately. "Father, save me." Young Jun looked at the two monsters within reach. He no longer had any arrogance. He extended his hand to young Anji, pleading for help with a face filled with fear. However, young Anji had no intention of stopping. He rushed to the back of the hall like a wisp of smoke. He could have more sons, but he only had one life. He was truly a hero who cut his losses, extremely vicious. Young Jun instantly despaired. He closed his eyes and felt a strong wind blow at him, but he did not feel any pain. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Li Qingshan and Little An did not even look at him, rushing past him and chasing after young Anji. Young Anji's movement techniques were impressive. Once he got far away, it would be difficult to catch up. Young Jun rarely took off his clothes. He ignored his sweat-drenched heavy clothes and immediately moved his feet, rushing out of the hall. He kept repeating in his heart, "I must take revenge. I must take revenge." Fart. A bone hand stabbed into his back, piercing through him. Young Jun looked at his chest in disbelief. He took a few steps forward and fell to the ground with a thud. When Little An saw that young Jun wanted to escape, he swung his left arm, and his bone arm flew out like a hidden weapon, killing him. As if it was being pulled by an invisible force, the skeletal arm flew to the back of the palace. Behind the main hall was the Dragon's Gate sect's ancestral hall. It enshrined the portraits of the past sect masters of the Dragon's Gate sect. The first sect master's portrait was the largest, close to 3 meters tall. It depicted a swordsman as tall as a grown man, wielding the soaring dragon sword as he looked down on the entire ancestral hall with an indifferent expression. It was rumored that when he arrived in Qingyang, he saw bandits running amok and slaughtering the innocent, so he killed his way into the den of bandits alone and slaughtered them all. He became known as the Soaring Dragon Swordsman, which was similar to Li Qingshan's rise to fame. The commoners and gentry of Qingyang were all filled with gratitude. They asked him to stay behind, so he established a sect on the Dragon's Gate mountain and passed down martial arts, establishing the Dragon's Gate sect. However, he probably never imagined that this would happen today. No, perhaps he did. The secret passageway of the Dragon's Gate sect was built behind the offering table beneath his portrait. As long as he entered it, he would be able to pass through the center of the mountain and escape with his life from an unknown exit. This was where young Anji's objective lay. Young Anji's confidence in his movement technique was crushed by the wind that constantly drew closer from behind. He only needed an instant, and he would end up like the elders and disciples in the hall. Perhaps he had lost his mind due to fear, but he actually cried out, "Save me, founding ancestor." Li Qingshan immediately pulled back the hand that he had extended towards young Anji's back. He was worried that young Anji would be like Xiong Xiangwu, possessing trump cards that surpassed regular cultivators. With his current experience, items that belonged to the category of spiritual artifacts or techniques were not rare in this world. These techniques could be very weak, but they could also be very powerful, making it impossible for him to accurately predict them. Indeed, before young Anji finished speaking, a small sword on the offering table suddenly shone brightly and flew towards Li Qingshan. Although the small sword shone with golden light, it was clearly a wooden sword that had been painted gold. At this moment, it exploded with astonishing sword light, illuminating the pitch-black ancestral hall as it turned into a golden rainbow. The sword was still dozens of feet away, but Li Qingshan already felt a stabbing pain in his forehead. Furthermore, he had a feeling that no matter how he dodged, he would definitely not be able to avoid the sword's attack. Young Anji relaxed slightly. This was a secret that only the previous Dragon's Gate sect leader knew. When their founding ancestor passed away, he did not leave behind a corpse, but only this small sword. It was very similar to the Daoist's Bing Jie. He had instructed his first disciple, who was young Anji's ancestor, to worship and pray to this small sword every day. He could not slack off. Once a strong enemy invaded, he could call for help, and they would definitely be able to avert danger. However, it could only be used once. Although young Anji had also followed and prayed for decades, he did not believe this rumor at first. He had also examined the small sword, and it was only an extremely ordinary wooden sword. Any iron sword would be able to split it in half. However, he did not dare to not believe it. He had also considered how to use it, but he thought that once the Iron Fist and the Drawn Reins village joined forces, with the county magistrate's troops, they would definitely attack the mountain on a large scale. With thousands of people attacking, a sword that could only be used once would not have any decisive effect. It was not until this moment of life and death that he finally gave it a try, disregarding everything else, that he actually succeeded. Li Qingshan also knew that he could not take it head-on. His body flipped in the air, but the small sword seemed to have a mind of its own. It twisted in the air and let out a shrill whistle as it tore through the air. With a whoosh, it pounced towards Li Qingshan like lightning. Li Qingshan felt that the spot between his brows was becoming more and more powerful, and cold air assaulted his face. Suddenly, he thrust his sword horizontally, piercing the body of the small sword. Little An tried to help Li Qingshan out of the predicament, but not only did his sword that could pierce through metal and stone fail to break the small wooden sword, he instead felt a huge force pass through the body of the sword. The flying dragon sword that could cut through iron like mud shattered into countless pieces, shooting in all directions. Little An was also sent flying, crashing into a pillar. However, the small sword only dimmed slightly. After a pause, it continued piercing towards Li Qingshan. It would not rest until it took his life. Li Qingshan had already retreated to a corner of the hall. Using the opportunity Little An had bought for him, he unfurled the cursive sword calligraphy and poured in his quintessence without caring about anything else. At this critical moment, a slash lit up, and a sword light soared up and shot out, clashing with the small sword that shone with golden light. There was no sound that could be considered loud. Only a ring of spiritual light spread out in the hall, like a small sun that suddenly rose up. However, Li Qingshan felt like thunder rumbled in his ears. His ears buzzed, and a trickle of blood flowed out. The light dissipated very quickly, and the portraits of the Dragon's Gate sect master turned into powder and scattered. It was the same for Li Qingshan's clothes. On closer inspection, there were thousands of sword marks that were as thin as a cow's hair on the walls and floor. The shattered small sword released thousands of sword chi that were as fine as light, silently piercing through everything in the hall. Even Li Qingshan could not help but be dumbfounded by such might. The might of the flying sword left a deep impression in his mind. Young Anji had been guarding the entrance to the secret passageway in the first place. When he saw that his assassination attempt had failed, he immediately turned around and entered the secret passageway. As long as he entered the secret passageway, he could activate the mechanism and place down a huge boulder to seal the entrance. No one would be able to catch up to him then. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.